What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto has a mission to protect rich female Sasuke? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Man, what am I going to do? Sighed Naruto. He was sitting on the ledge of a roof. There was a festival going on under him. Bright lights and lively people despite it being past midnight. Naruto is simply surveilling the hotel that Tiki is staying at. That damn perv. I kinda wish something would happen. A shooting star flies past Naruto but he doesn't notice. Flashback time. 3 days earlier. Oh hey Naruto. Jiraiya said, while walking on the street. Tons of people out and about looking at the giant white-haired man. What is it? Naruto sulked. Naruto remembers his 10-time in a row reoccurring nightmare. I'ma go do some research for my next novel. Perhaps this is the breakthrough that I have been waiting for. Jiraiya giggled and blushing. Jiraiya is seen doing some weird hand gestures lol. Sure, knock yourself out. It's not like Baldi is leaving his hotel anytime soon. He's been inside for an entire 2 days. Naruto said depressingly. Droop walking along with Jiraiya. Jiraiya disappears within the crowd and Naruto only heard from him once every 2 days. End garbage flashback that forces Jiraiya out of the plot. Satsuki Pav. She is jumping through trees elegantly. She is injured on her legs from fighting a group of Jonins prior to this. They had weapons covered in poison, but for Satsuki, she is immune to nearly all types of poison. Damn, to think they put a challenge. And the damn target is in the town of Ebisa, Satsuki thought. Then she spot the brightly covered town from a half a mile away. Finally, I've reached it. But, should I try to attack the target right now or wait until these injuries recover? She thought while leaping. I'll just get a perimeter around the target and just play it safe. Once I figure the location of the bodyguards and their movements, I'll just attack once I heal up fully. He is a rich political figure so he most definitely has top bodyguards. Cuts to Naruto. Why do boogers taste like that? Like how does that even form and why is it so salty? Naruto thought. Then for some reason, he felt chills down his spine. It's, brr, so. Call LDDDDD. Guess I better, move around a bit. Naruto got up and started walking on the tiled roofs. It made such a satisfying noise walking on them. Naruto decides to start stomping. This feels oddly fun. Naruto almost let his guard down fully and ended up getting a kunai scratch a piece of his neck. TCH. An attacker, he performs shadow clone jutsu and 4 of them spread out looking for the suspect. Naruto makes another clone and tells him to find Arrow Sennin. Wait a second, that man just created clones of himself, Satsuki thought while hiding from a tree outside of the town. Yes, she can't recognize Naruto even though he's wearing bright orange clothing, but it's nighttime, and the bright colors of the city makes everyone seem colorful. Haha, you thought you found a pothole. Nope, no, it can't be. Why would that idiot be here of all places? I thought he was with Jiraiya of the Sennin. I have to get a closer look. There's no way that's Naruto. Satsuki drops down from tree and starts to head for the wall and drop down from it. Interesting, this town is packed with women, no wonder the target is in this city. It's renowned for its nightlife and tourist attractions. Satsuki goes to the corner of a wall and looks at Clone 4 leap across rooftops. TCH. Damn. Pant, why am I panting at a time like this? She whispered to herself. She has a feeling that she's being watched and doesn't know why. This part of the town seems eerily. It has more males in this side and it's more quiet around here. Peaceful, hey, you. Satsuki turned around to the person calling and replied. What's a beautiful lady like yourself doing in these back parts of the town? Said some random white-haired man. Get lost. Satsuki stared into the soul of the random man there. What, do you have any idea where you are? We control these parts, he shouted. More men appeared and they had lustful eyes staring at her. Genjutsu *, she activated her Sharingan and goes crazy with it lol. What's happening? Stop. Stop. Waste of my time damn it. Satsuki said to herself. Naruto, why can't I find the attacker? But at least I warned the hotel and they put him in a secure room. Naruto standing on top of the hotel. Clone 1 comes back, then 2, then 3, then 4. They simply said, "Found no one," puff. They disappeared. Clone 5 was looking for Jiraiya Sensei but had trouble finding him in the giant crowds. "Excuse me sir, sorry, do you have sorry to both?" Clone 5 trying to ask random citizens for help. "Hi, have you seen a tall white-haired man around here?" "White-haired huh, wait. I have." He went towards the Izza section. "For a boy your age, you should avoid it," said some random simpleton citizen used for merely exposition lol. "Wah, wait why? I am very strong by the way." Man. These newer generations never listen, do they? Listen, crimes happen there a lot and you can get hurt. I think I saw him with a girl or chasing after a girl. Chasing a girl huh? That's definitely got to be pervy sage. Clone 5 thought as he headed towards that direction. Completely ignoring the random man simpleton used for merely exposition. Clone 5 rushed past groups of women in dresses and all sorts of costumes. He bumps into the open market and corners of the walls. He goes past the big main streets and enters through the alley's ways. He then notices a white-haired man on the floor. Oh my god, I cannot believe this, who the hell is this idiot? Clone 5 inspecting the knocked-out body. He notices something out of the corner of his eye. A swift and agile shadow escaping with such speeds. There, he leaps forward and chases after the shadow. He kept chasing and chasing, then he sees a stair. Arg. Naruto receives information from Clone 5 that he may have the attacker. Yes. Cracks knuckles and heads off from the rooftop. Satsuki, what the fuck is he doing here? Why is his shitty clones here? She is furious right now. Yet, calm and controlled. She is reading herself for a fight. My hands and legs. Why are they fidgeting? Am I nervous? Or has my injuries been more severe than previously thought? She is staring into her hands while avoiding any human interactions nearby. To think, that clown was in this town during my mission. He is definitely going to interfere with my plans. He is so obsessed with me. If he continues to persist against me, then I will kill him and permanently sever what minuscule bond he has of me. Naruto leaves the hotel rooftop and rushes towards the outer parts of the brightly light town. TCHH. I have to reach that spot quick. I think it might be her. Naruto is closing in on the alleyways from the top and looking down. He jumps down. Naruto is surveying the area. There's garbage and trash cans everywhere. Knocked out men on the ground. One lamppost, broken light. Puddles on the floor. He leaves and looks around the area. Satsuki, panting HUUU. Cough, what the why am I feeling wheezy? At a time like this, she whispered while moving stealthily across the alleyways. If that idiot is here, then Jiraiya has to be with him somewhere. If I fight Naruto, then he will be alerted and head to me. I have to lay low. I can't let my emotions get the best of me and I kill Naruto here. She is grasping her chest while moving through, avoiding any signs of people whatsoever. Damn, I thought I found just disappeared so quickly. Naruto put his finger under his chin while chilling at the edge of some random building. Hey Brad, huh? What do you want, Kurama? Listen. I normally would never speak to an annoying idiot such as yourself. But, that Uchiha, she's definitely nearby. Do not let your guard down for even a second, huh? How do you, shut up you brat. Focus and don't lower your guard down. The QB screamed in his mind. Naruto finally gets serious and calms himself. He is focusing all his senses, he has to find her. If she isn't anywhere on top, the next spot is at the ground. He jumps down and starts running. His body is moving on instinct, his nose somehow knows what direction to head to. Panting, why am I like this? I need to find a hotel to stay at for now. It seems I have reached my limit. Now to just find a. She stops in her tracks. The area she is in is near the town wall and surrounded by buildings. There are rats everywhere towards the trash and a couple plants around. The area is not lit up at all and has only glimpses of light coming from the main street. Her eyes open wide and then squint. The atmosphere is intense. She stops panting and puts her hand on her blade holster. Naruto is standing straight up and his eyes is creeping up on every aspect of her body. He is left speechless and his mouth left gaped. He doesn't know what to say. Her Sharingan activates. It's a 3-tomo Sharingan. Satsuki, he says lowly almost as a whisper. Naruto said calmly. No one dared to make a move. Then Naruto decides to make the first move. His serious intense state switched up immediately into happiness. He is smiling and his body is relaxing. Haha. It seems that I have finally found you, he jeered. He put his hands behind his head. Yee, it appears so. She is observing all her surroundings looking for any traps. Naruto realizes this. He's not here. What are you talking about? Jiraiya-sensei. He's not around here. What the how did he know what I was thinking, she thought. What, you expect me to believe that? And why wouldn't he be here? I thought you were training with him these past years. Huff. Naruto sighed. I have been training with him but he's too busy dealing with the people of this town. I haven't heard from him until yesterday. He sulked. This is Naruto and I haven't seen him tell a lie to me once in my life. But if what he's saying is correct then. She grabs her blade out and prepares to fight. She smirks at him. Indeed, you baffle me sometimes, Naruto. You gave such precious information to the enemy and now I can fight without any worries. She's in a defensive position but waiting to hear what he has to say before she goes on the offense. Enemy? You're my friend. He stated angrily and puts his hands up to perform a shadow clone jutsu. Satsuki leaps forward and is using lightning chakra to her blade to increase power and speed. TCH. Naruto thought while summoning a clone. But he is too late to make a move. Satsuki's speed blitzes him and stabs Naruto in the left lung. Cough. Aga. Blood splats from his mouth. Waga. Naruto grabbing the blade and tightening his grip on it. I told you, Naruto. I only spared your life the first time on a whim. This time is going to be your. Satsuki notices that her vision is becoming blurry. She retracts her sword and sheaths it. She decides to run away but she is stumbling over and over with each step. Panting asterisk. Why is my body disrupted by the poison earlier, she said lowly. I had to leave right away. I had to spare his life again. She is about to leap towards over the wall but gets grabbed by someone. It's Naruto's clone. Cough. Blood splattered. Naruto is clenching his chest. He is furious and notices her trying to leave again. Come on body. Move. She's about to leave. I can't let her leave through my fingers again. Naruto forcing himself to move and he dives towards her. It took all of his energy for that. Yes, I just nerfed him. Satsuki Chidori's the clone and jumps up in the air but gets tackled by Naruto towards a building and crash inside. Ag. Satsuki gets up but feels her body failing out on her. What the fuck body? I need to leave. Work damn it. She is panting heavy and her Sharingan changes to blank black state. Why are you so obsessed with me? You fucking loser. Panting she leaves the kitchen holding a kitchen knife and attacks him. You're my friend. If I can't save a single friend then I can never become Hokage. He leaps forward with a kunai and attacks. They exchange a fury of slashes and one notable slash scratches his right cheek horizontally. Naruto is gaining the advantage and is overpowering Satsuki. Shut the hell up. Tired of your constant rambling. You haven't changed in 2 years. You are all talk and no bite. She then breaks through the window and leaps out. Wait, where you going? He follows her. He easily catches up to her and charges a Rasengan and throws it at the ground in front of her, creating a small crater behind the building. Damn it. In like 30 seconds I am going to lose consciousness. She is falling and then finally uses her trump card. She activates her curse mark. Black marks form all over her left side of her face and body. So much chakra was flying through the air. Satsuki. To think you have created this much of a gap between me. Naruto is clenching his fists so hard that he is bleeding from it. Satsuki. Naruto. She is then trading blow for blow against Naruto. She then throws a kick towards his stomach and leaps onto the roof. She then pushes her luck and activates Curse Mark 2. The black flames engulf her entire body and her body changes completely. She grows wings and flies off the town. But shortly after flying right over the walls, she loses consciousness and is seen crashing towards the forest near a small cabin. Naruto sees this happening. She's in trouble. She was affected by something. Perhaps some type of poison. To think she fought while being under its influence. She's become too strong. Naruto clenching his teeth hard. He barely was able to calm his nerves and he leapt off. He is in bad shape as well. Satsuki had fried his insides badly with her lightning chakra amplifying the blade. He'll have to thank the Kyuubi for that. He finds her and grabs her body up, carrying her in his arms. He then goes towards the cabin. It's abandoned and just one broken bed is there. He checks outside and it started to rain. Weird. Why has it started raining? Naruto put her on the broken bed, wondering. This is actually done by Satsuki. She was planning on releasing Kirin attack on Naruto and to bring upon its fullest potential. She has to create tons of electrical discarriage in the air and rain. When she was use her lightning chakra, she was also putting some of her chakra towards the sky to bring upon clouds and form lightning. This in turn caused rain, and since Satsuki didn't discharge it into a form of attack, there are now thunderous storm clouds near the town. Naruto puts his hand to his chin. Wait, I can just bring back her body to the village this way. With her there, things can finally go back to normal and I can finally have a friend and rival with me every day. He started smiling. He made his mind up and goes to grab her body and leans in. Panting, breathing heavy she groans at the slightest touch. Naruto stopped his actions and notices her new breathing pattern. He notices that she is very sensitive to his touch. His eyes open. He notices her messy yet silky long black hair. I wanna feel he runs his fingers through it. Whoa, why is it so soft and so light, but how does it spike up though? The blonde then realizes something. I can't take her home. If I take her home and she doesn't want to, then I am no better than Orochimaru. Grips bed very hard, who knows what he has forced her to do. He then grits his teeth. He is in a bad mood just like that. That's it. All I have to do is wait for her to wake up and then beat some sense into her until she agrees. Naruto smiles and then fully picks up her. I need to take her to hospital. I do not know how to help her or what poison she has. But it's raining, and she can get a fever from it if we go screw it. It's a risk for her to get help. Just hang in there, Satsuki. He rushes through the door and heads for the town. You thought you found another loophole. Nope. Naruto's chest wound is healing fast. His innards have almost been fully repaired and his bleeding has stopped. He doesn't notice it or chooses to not notice it because his friend is in critical injury compared to him. Naruto arrives at the hospital. Quick, this woman has been poisoned and is in danger. He screamed at the lady at the desk. She responds quickly to the blonde. Okay, just bring her down to the waiting room. A doctor will come immediately, said the clerk. Screams. The doctor screams as she enters the wide giant waiting room. Is that Satsuki Uchiha? The doctor is stunned and she is barely able to compose herself. Oh ye it is. Please help her, she is in danger. The blonde replied with her still in his arms. No, that monster is a dangerous criminal. The black-haired doctor replied while taking a step back. She recently hurt a group of Junins a couple days earlier. One of them is my husband, she stated. The blonde stunned and his eyes widens. He puts Satsuki down on a chair. Please, she isn't a monster. She's my friend, even though she attacked your husband and his group. But did she kill any of them? He begged and questioned at the doctor. She takes a step forward. Her hand is gripping each other in front of her. Tchh. Sighs. She takes a deep breath and calms herself. My husband. He said that if she really wanted to, she could have killed them. All of them are injured, but none have a truly fatal injury besides broken bones. She is having trouble speaking. The blonde Spiky thanks the lords on this luck. She hadn't killed any of them, so he can finally convince the doctor to help. Naruto then gets on his knees. I am sorry for my friend's attack. I will take any punishment in her place. Just help her this one time. He begs and slowly gets up. Once she heals, I will change her. If I can't change her, then I can never become Hokage. Naruto stated confidently up until he said, Hokage. He said it nervously. Can I really become Hokage? The doctor was left stunned. To think he would beg and accept punishment for his friend. He reminds me of you. I remember when you begged a doctor in a foreign nation to help me recover. That doctor saved my life and I decided to become a doctor after that. I used to be in a horrible place filled with war, but now I can help people and you and our kids. The doctor thought and an unintentional smile appeared on her face. She relaxes her body and heads towards him. You do not need to do that. I will help your friend. She looks at Naruto. Yes. He jeers at her and puts his hands in the air. Thank you so much. Wait, you have to make me a promise though. She smirks at him. Promise? Sure, anything, he states back at her. You have to promise me to change her completely. And to be by her side all the time. If you can't do that, then I won't heal her. She states her deal to the blonde. A big grin appears. Of course, I will never go back on my word. That has been my ninja way ever since. He is smiling so much. He has never been this happy in life ever since. The doctor goes to her and with Naruto's help go to a special room outside the facility and into a small building. I'ma skip this part of the story because it's just Naruto being worried and all. And I am lazy right now. Time skip to Satsuki waking up, but she still needs to be hospitalized. Basically 3 hours from now. It is around like 4 in the morning. Satsuki Pav, where am I? She questions as she wakes up. She immediately notices Naruto sleeping on a chair and the room is clearly a hospital room. She deducts that she had too much of the dose of poison than her body can handle. She gets up off the bed but feels the intense pain all over her body. She falls to the ground. Demeet, I don't have time for this. I have to leave and find a hiding place. Thankfully the idiot hadn't woken up and she notices her clothes and sword at the edge of the room. Her Sharingan activate. He must be killed now. I need to sever this bond. She unsheathes the blade and walks towards Naruto's sleeping body on the chair. TCHH. That dream. Naruto was begging someone to help him. Was that reality or what? She remembers in her dream that Naruto is begging someone to help his friend. It has been years since I had a vivid dream. Which means, the dream was me listening to Naruto beg some doctor to heal me. That's the only reason why I am in a hospital. Her deductions is correct as always. Her hand is shaking a lot. That idiot. Why would he go so far for me? Why does he continue to go above and beyond just for me? She stares all over his body. She notices that his right cheek has a horizontal scar. His clothes is ripped and there is a hole on the left side where she stabbed him. There's another giant scar on his chest. Look at the pain I cause him. He still decides to help me. If I wasn't weakened then I would have killed him definitely. She internally screams in her mind. She sheathes the blade back and changes her clothes. A tiny super small upwards curve appears on her lips. I guess I have to repay my debt this time. She opens the windows and leaps out. UGHH. She verbally expresses her pain while leaping. She is sore all over her body. I will just find a hotel and lay low. I need to fully recover before attacking the target. I only have 8 days to kill this Tiki guy. She enters a hotel in Genjutsu's the attendant and books a cheap hotel room and makes sure to have a do not disturb sign on her door. The attendant agrees, takes her to her room and leaves acting like nothing happened. Satsuki collapses on the floor immediately after. She crawls to the bed and sleeps. Sleeping her pain away. Naruto jolted awake, nearly tumbling from his chair. His heart raced, beating painfully against his ribcage. The pale moonlight cast a faint glow on the empty hospital bed. Empty. His blood went cold. Satsuki, he whispered, scanning the shadows, already knowing the answer. He scrambled up, knocking over his chair in the process. Pain lanced through his chest, the fading stab wound burning as if to mock him. She'd left. Again. Frustration boiled up, mixing with something heavier, something colder. Damn it. He slammed his fist into the bedside table, splintering the cheap wood. He'd been a fool to think she'd stay put. Taking a shaky breath, Naruto forced himself to calm. She was injured, poisoned, exhausted. She couldn't have gone far. He closed his eyes, focusing his senses, reaching out desperately for any trace of her chakra or scent. And there it was. Faint, but distinct, a familiar mixture. Naruto turned sharply toward the open window, curtains fluttering gently in the cool breeze. I'm not letting you go, he whispered, determination replacing panic as he leapt out into the night. Naruto, streets of Ebisa, late night. The storm had passed, but the scent lingered, ozone and wet stone. Naruto moved through the quiet backstreets of Ebisa town, his jacket sticking to his skin where the rain hadn't fully dried. His chest still ached, but Kurama's chakra was knitting it together, slow but steady. The real pain wasn't physical. Satsuki, he didn't know why he said it aloud. Maybe to convince himself she was still out there. Maybe because part of him still didn't believe she'd actually tried to kill him. His nose twitched. It was faint, but the scent was growing stronger. He moved quicker, footsteps barely echoing against slick cobblestone streets. Each corner turned, every alley navigated, brought him closer to her. Naruto finally stopped in front of a small 3-story inn. A single lantern flickered outside, the soft glow reflecting in puddles scattered around his feet. He scaled the wall quietly, fingers gripping the slick wooden ledge as he slipped through the third-floor window with barely a whisper. Inside, the air was heavy. She was here. Satsuki, hotel room, moments earlier. Satsuki sat on the bed, back pressed firmly to the wall, damp cloth resting loosely on her forehead. Her eyes were half-lidded, staring blankly at the ceiling, her breath labored and uneven. The curse mark had receded, but the backlash left her nerves raw and body trembling. Every movement felt like a chore, each breath painful. She had no energy to run, no strength left to fight. Yet even now, at her weakest, she could feel him approaching, could sense his chakra brushing against her own like an unwanted caress. Her pulse quickened, eyes sharpening in annoyance. He was stubborn, annoyingly, infuriatingly stubborn. She sensed him just moments before he slipped silently through the window. "Don't scream," Naruto said softly, hands lifted defensively as if she were the victim here. Her Sharingan flared instinctively, but dimmed almost instantly. She hated that her body relaxed even slightly at the sight of him. "You tracked me," she said coldly. He tapped his nose, offering a faint smile. "Your scent. Kurama thinks it's stupid, but I just knew it was you." She rolled her eyes, irritation masking relief. Her hand twitched toward her blade but stopped short, too drained even to grasp the hilt. "You came here to drag me back, didn't you?" she asked sharply, bitterness seeping into her voice. Naruto shook his head slowly, moving carefully to crouch near the opposite wall, giving her space she silently appreciated. "I came here to make you listen." Her eyes narrowed. "And if I don't?" Naruto took a deep breath, steadying himself before meeting her gaze directly. "You're not in any shape to fight," he pointed out calmly. "And I'm not in any shape to chase you across the country again. So, let's make a deal." She glared at him, wary but intrigued despite herself. "A deal?" "1 week," he proposed firmly, voice softening slightly. "You stay here, rest, recover, and during that week, I'll do everything I can to convince you to come back." Her heart skipped a beat before she ruthlessly silenced it. "And if I say no after that?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Then you go. I won't stop you." Silence stretched painfully between them. The only noise was the monotonous ticking of a broken ceiling fan, each second drawing out her hesitation. Satsuki finally broke eye contact, staring blankly at the dark corner of the room. "Fine. 1 week." Her voice was quiet, resigned. "But don't expect anything." Naruto smiled faintly, visibly relieved. "I won't," he said softly. "But I won't hold back, either." Later that night, Satsuki paused. Naruto had left shortly after, promising to return with food and medical supplies. She hated how casually he acted, as if they hadn't nearly killed each other mere hours ago. As if her blade hadn't pierced his chest. Yet she couldn't deny how utterly drained she felt. Her limbs trembled faintly from exertion, her vision blurred periodically, and her muscles screamed in protest with every subtle shift. She needed rest, and the truth she loathed admitting to herself was simple: right now, she had nowhere else to go. 1 week, she whispered bitterly to the darkness, hating how easily he'd convinced her. 1 week was more than enough time. Time to heal. Time to regain her strength. Enough time to vanish completely, abandoning the mission and Naruto once and for all. Yet as sleep finally took hold of her exhausted body, one thought stubbornly clung to her consciousness. His voice, desperate yet determined, calling her name through the storm. She closed her eyes tighter, trying and failing to erase that echo from her mind. To be continued. Same night, Naruto paused. Naruto slipped back into the room quietly, a small bag in his hands filled with medical supplies, food, and bandages. The faint glow of moonlight illuminated Satsuki's sleeping form. He paused, noticing her uneven breathing and how her brow was furrowed, as if even in sleep she was battling something. Setting the supplies carefully on the table, Naruto approached slowly, cautiously watching her for signs of waking. Her hands occasionally clenched the sheets, and she flinched as if struck by unseen enemies. A pang of guilt shot through him. "Is this because of me?" Naruto reached out hesitantly, his fingertips barely brushing against her forehead. It was warm, too warm. She stirred slightly, and he quickly withdrew his hand, heart pounding in his chest. She didn't wake. He exhaled softly, relieved. Moving quietly, Naruto soaked a small cloth with cold water from the pitcher he'd brought and placed it gently on her forehead. She sighed softly, visibly relaxing at the cool sensation, tension easing from her body bit by bit. Naruto took a step back, his own exhaustion finally catching up to him. He slumped onto the floor, back pressed against the wall, facing her bed. His eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but sleep refused to come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see her blade piercing his chest, feel her trembling hands holding that knife above him. "You're not alone, Satsuki," he whispered softly into the dim room, unsure if he was reassuring her or himself. Not anymore. He forced himself to stay awake, his resolve unwavering. Tonight, he would watch over her. Tonight, she would know what it was like to be protected, not hunted, not feared, not alone. And tomorrow, he would start the fight for her soul anew. Late night, Satsuki Pav. Satsuki awoke slowly, her mind foggy and body aching deeply. For a moment, panic surged through her veins before she remembered where she was, and why. Naruto. Her eyes flickered open cautiously, immediately finding him slumped awkwardly against the wall, clearly exhausted but stubbornly awake. His breathing was steady but strained, he was fighting sleep, refusing to leave her unattended. Something inside her twisted painfully. Annoyance mixed with confusion, guilt with an anger she couldn't place. "Why are you so persistent?" she murmured bitterly, quietly enough that she hoped he wouldn't hear. But he stirred anyway, blue eyes cracking open immediately, finding hers in the soft moonlight. "You're awake," he mumbled sleepily, a gentle smile breaking through his exhaustion. She scowled, though the harshness didn't reach her eyes. "You didn't have to stay." "I wanted to," he replied simply, shifting slightly and wincing at lingering pain. She noticed immediately, her gaze drifting to his chest where she'd stabbed him. She averted her eyes quickly, anger replaced momentarily by shame. Her fists tightened around the sheets. Silence filled the small room until Naruto spoke again, his voice softer, nearly a whisper. "Does it still hurt?" Her eyes snapped up, instantly defensive. "What?" "The poison," he clarified gently, nodding toward her trembling hands. "Are your wounds? Are you still hurting?" She hesitated, instinct telling her to deny it, to push him away, but something deeper within her refused. "I'm fine," she lied, eyes downcast. Naruto's silence lingered, heavy but gentle. Then, softly, footsteps approached. She stiffened instinctively, wary, but he simply placed a small packet on the bedside table next to her. "It's medicine. For the poison and pain," he explained quietly, stepping back to give her space. "You don't have to take it from my hand. Just, please take it." Her heart thudded painfully, unfamiliar feelings stirring within her chest. Gratitude battled suspicion, and anger wrestled with an unspoken relief. "Why?" she finally asked, voice barely audible. Naruto paused at the window, moonlight haloing his figure as he turned slowly back to face her. His gaze was earnest, steady, and unflinching. "Because I care about you. More than you think you deserve." He smiled softly, sadness flickering briefly behind his eyes. "Good night, Satsuki." He slipped out of the window before she could respond, leaving her staring silently into the emptiness he left behind, her heart hammering in ways she refused to understand. The medicine sat quietly beside her, an offer of peace she desperately didn't want to need, yet couldn't bring herself to reject. Slowly, reluctantly, she reached out and took it into her shaking hands. Early morning. Rooftop overlooking Ebisa Town, Naruto Pav. Naruto watched silently from his perch, the gentle pink hues of dawn slowly overtaking the dark skies above Ebisa Town. The cool morning air brushed his skin, soothing the lingering heat radiating from his half-healed wounds. He touched the spot where Satsuki had stabbed him. A sharp sting lingered beneath his fingertips, a physical echo of something far deeper. "She really meant it this time," he murmured softly, almost to himself. A familiar, gruff voice echoed within his mind. "You humans never learn. She tried to kill you, brat. Twice." Naruto smiled bitterly, glancing sideways, even though Kurama wasn't physically there. She hesitated. "A hesitation is hardly mercy," Kurama growled. "Don't mistake a moment of weakness for kindness." Naruto shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on the inn across the street. "It's not weakness. There's still something there. Behind all that anger and pain, the old Satsuki still exists." I saw it, Kurama. You're a fool, the Nine Tails rumbled softly, though without its usual edge. Always chasing after broken things, hoping your stubbornness alone will fix them. Naruto chuckled quietly, warmth briefly softening his exhausted features. Maybe you're right, but wasn't I once just as broken? Didn't someone believe in me when everyone else gave up? Kurama's silence spoke volumes. Naruto's gaze hardened with determination as he stared at the room where Satsuki rested, remembering clearly her trembling hands, the hidden fear in her eyes masked by icy anger. 1 week, Naruto whispered, more firmly this time. If that's all she's giving me, I'll take it. Kurama sighed within him, the tone grudgingly resigned. You're impossible. Naruto smiled genuinely now, feeling the familiar warmth of purpose spreading through him. That's what everyone says. He stood up, stretching briefly as the sunlight crept fully over the horizon, bathing Ebisa town in golden warmth. He took a deep breath, letting it steady the turmoil still swirling inside him. 7 days, Naruto repeated softly, letting the resolve solidify into unbreakable determination. I'll show her she's not alone. No matter what it takes. He leapt off the roof, feet landing softly on the cobblestone street, heading toward the market stalls beginning to stir to life in the early morning. Today, the real battle began, not for their lives, but for her heart and soul. And this time, Naruto wouldn't fail. Meanwhile, same morning, hotel room, Satsuki Pav. Satsuki's eyes flickered open slowly, a dull ache pulsing through every muscle. She immediately remembered the night before, the medicine, Naruto's gentle but insistent concern, his irritating persistence. She pushed herself upright, wincing as her body protested even the slightest movement. Her gaze fell on the bedside table, lingering briefly on the empty medicine packet. Her fists tightened involuntarily, annoyed at her own weakness, irritated by the warmth that flooded her chest whenever Naruto's sincerity crossed her mind. Idiot, she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, placing her feet shakily on the floor. The poison's aftereffects lingered, sapping her strength and clarity, but she refused to let Naruto see her this vulnerable again. Still, as she stood slowly and approached the window, she couldn't shake off the strange sensation in her chest, a feeling she'd long since buried beneath layers of bitterness and pride. Outside, she caught a glimpse of familiar orange among the bustling crowd below. Naruto was moving through the morning market, already awake, already planning, already fighting. For her. Why? She whispered harshly, fingers gripping the window ledge hard enough to whiten her knuckles. She despised the way he made her feel, weak, uncertain, confused. But beneath that frustration lay something deeper, something she refused to name but couldn't deny. A small, stubborn voice deep within whispered softly, painfully. Because he's Naruto. She pulled away from the window, forcing herself to regain composure, but the thought lingered uncomfortably, echoing within the quiet solitude of the room. She had given him 1 week. She'd made her conditions clear. He was naive if he thought he could change her mind. And yet, her heartbeat quickened slightly. Her fists clenched tighter. She pushed down the unwelcome emotion ruthlessly. I'll just use this time to regain my strength, she told herself firmly, forcing conviction into her voice. Then I'll leave. For good. Yet as she sat back down, gazing blankly at the cracked ceiling, Satsuki wondered silently how much of that was a promise, and how much was simply an attempt to silence the growing ache in her heart. Early morning, hotel room, Naruto and Satsuki Pav. The gentle knock on the door pulled Satsuki from her uneasy thoughts. Her body tensed instinctively, heart quickening until a familiar voice cut through the tension. Satsuki, you awake? Naruto. She sighed softly, irritation tempered by something she refused to admit felt like relief. Unfortunately, she replied coolly. Naruto stepped cautiously inside, balancing several bags awkwardly in his arms. The smell of warm bread and savory broth instantly filled the small room, tugging at her hunger despite her stubborn resistance. I figured you'd be hungry, Naruto said hesitantly, setting the food down on the small table. You haven't eaten properly since yesterday. Satsuki raised an eyebrow but said nothing, watching warily as Naruto opened containers, steam rising in thin trails. He glanced at her, giving a hopeful, uncertain smile. It's just breakfast, he offered quietly. You don't need to say anything. After a tense pause, Satsuki reluctantly stood up, ignoring the immediate pain that radiated through her stiff muscles. She took a cautious seat across from Naruto, careful to maintain her cold demeanor despite the enticing smell of food. Naruto handed her a pair of chopsticks, their fingers briefly brushing. She quickly drew her hand away, not missing the quiet disappointment flickering across his face. They ate quietly, an awkward silence blanketing the room. Occasionally, Naruto glanced up at her, as if searching for an opening, something, anything to bridge the distance between them. Finally, he cleared his throat softly. You know, Ebisa's food isn't half bad. Reminds me a little of Ichiraku's. She scoffed quietly, eyes locked onto her bowl. Trust you to compare everything to ramen. Naruto chuckled softly, visibly relieved that she'd responded at all. Hey, Ichiraku's ramen is legendary. You used to like it, too. Satsuki's hand froze mid-bite, a flash of memory unexpectedly softening her features before she quickly hid it again. She hesitated, then reluctantly muttered, it wasn't terrible. He smiled warmly, blue eyes sparkling gently in the morning sunlight. Maybe we could go again someday. You know, when things aren't so complicated. Satsuki's grip tightened subtly around her chopsticks, her gaze suddenly fixed on the bowl again, a turmoil of conflicting emotions stirring inside her chest. Stop pretending things could ever be normal again, she whispered harshly. Naruto's smile faded slightly, replaced by quiet sincerity. Maybe not exactly normal, but better. I really believe that. She said nothing, the silence stretching once more. Eventually, Naruto broke it again, quieter this time, almost hesitant. Thanks for letting me help you last night. With the medicine, I mean. Satsuki's eyes flickered upward sharply, something vulnerable briefly surfacing beneath her icy glare. You didn't give me much choice. Naruto shrugged, voice softening gently. You've never been easy to help. But I figured you'd push me away if I didn't try. Her breath caught slightly, betraying her carefully maintained indifference. She quickly looked away again, uncomfortable with the honesty shining clearly in his eyes. A long, silent moment passed. Satsuki shifted slightly in discomfort, suddenly keenly aware of her clothes. They were damp, sticking uncomfortably to her skin, torn in multiple places, a reminder of how vulnerable she currently was. She shifted again, grimacing slightly as the wet fabric pulled at her wounds. Naruto noticed immediately, concern clouding his expression. Are you sure you're okay? Satsuki hesitated, pride battling with practicality. She glared briefly, then sighed deeply, reluctantly admitting, my clothes are still wet. I need to shower and change. Naruto blinked in surprise, then glanced awkwardly around the room, cheeks faintly reddening. Oh, right, I guess you would. I could get you something dry. My stuff's clean, at least. She scowled, heat rising faintly to her own cheeks, hating her lack of alternatives. Fine, just hurry up. Naruto nodded quickly, relieved, and left the room briefly, returning moments later holding a folded stack of clothes, mostly orange, naturally. It's all I have, he apologized quietly, handing it to her. But, it's better than staying wet. She accepted reluctantly, standing up and holding the clothes awkwardly. Turn around. Naruto immediately spun around, fixing his gaze intently on the wall, visibly tense. Satsuki walked slowly toward the bathroom door, pausing briefly before entering. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the quiet of the room. Naruto. He stiffened slightly. Yeah, thanks. His eyes widened, surprise mingling with relief, though he didn't dare look back. You're welcome. She quickly stepped into the bathroom, closing the door behind her with a soft click, her heart pounding uncomfortably. As she stripped off her damaged clothing, the lingering warmth of their brief, awkward interaction refused to leave. Wearing Naruto's clothes, his overly bright, annoyingly orange clothes, felt strangely intimate. Yet, even more troubling, it also felt safe. Outside, Naruto sat silently, smiling faintly to himself, hope flickering stubbornly in his heart. For the first time in what felt like forever, Satsuki felt genuinely unsure of what she truly wanted. She emerged minutes later, hair still slightly damp, oversized orange sleeves falling loosely past her wrists. Naruto quickly glanced up, immediately looking away again, his cheeks reddening once more. It suits you, he murmured nervously, quickly adding, I mean, it looks better on you than me. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms defensively, though the softness in her voice betrayed the harshness. Everything looks better on me than you. Naruto chuckled quietly, tension easing gently between them. I can't argue with that. Another silence settled, softer this time, less strained. Naruto eventually stood up, gathering the empty bowls, his voice gentle. I'll let you rest. You should sleep some more. Satsuki hesitated briefly, pride warring with an unfamiliar feeling of gratitude. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. Naruto moved quietly toward the door, pausing briefly as he glanced back one final time. I'll check in later. And, thanks again for trusting me, even just a little. She looked away quickly, uncomfortable with how easily he saw through her. Just go. Naruto smiled softly, stepping out and closing the door gently behind him. Left alone, Satsuki sank back onto the bed, pulling the oversized orange sleeves tightly around herself. She knew she should plan her escape, knew she should run as far as possible. But instead, she lay quietly, staring at the ceiling as warmth slowly overtook the icy bitterness she'd clung to for so long. Maybe, she admitted quietly to herself, there was something worth staying for, even if only for 1 week. Morning. Hotel room. Satsuki Pav. Satsuki sat quietly on the bed, fingertips absently tracing the oversized sleeves of Naruto's shirt. The fabric smelled faintly like him, an annoying realization that lingered stubbornly in her mind. She scowled softly, annoyed at herself. Allowing Naruto to get close again was dangerous, and yet she couldn't fully suppress the strange comfort his presence brought her. She shook her head bitterly, forcing those thoughts away. She stood slowly, walking toward the window, hoping fresh air might clear her increasingly tangled mind. But just as she pushed the window open, a sudden flutter of wings startled her. Reflexively, she jumped back, eyes sharpening immediately. A small, dark bird perched silently on the windowsill, watching her intently with crimson eyes. A chill ran through her veins. Slowly, cautiously, Satsuki reached forward, retrieving the small scroll attached securely to its leg. She unrolled it, heart racing as she recognized the familiar handwriting instantly. Your delay grows suspicious. The target remains alive. You have limited time. Do not fail me. The words burned sharply in her mind, a cold reminder from Orochimaru himself. Her breath quickened, anxiety briefly overtaking her usually steady nerves. The bird chirped softly once, then flew off silently, vanishing into the brightening sky. Satsuki crushed the scroll tightly in her fist, teeth clenched. Orochimaru's warning was clear. Patience was thin. She needed to complete her mission, fast. Damn it, she hissed under her breath, anger at herself rising sharply. She'd allowed herself to become distracted. Her feelings, her confusion about Naruto, it was weakening her resolve. Suddenly, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Naruto was coming back. Quickly, she shoved the crumpled scroll into a pocket hidden beneath her damaged clothes, trying desperately to compose herself. The door opened gently, Naruto stepping inside with a cheerful smile, carrying another small bag. Hey, I got some more. He paused, noticing instantly how rigid she stood, eyes slightly narrowed. Concern crossed his face. Is everything okay? I'm fine, she snapped, voice harsher than intended. She quickly softened it, hiding her discomfort beneath a mask of cool indifference. But I can't keep wearing your clothes. Naruto blinked, briefly startled by the sudden change of topic, his expression quickly shifting to awkward embarrassment. Oh, right. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. But, I don't exactly know your size. Satsuki sighed deeply, frustration clear. Obviously. I'll have to pick something myself. Naruto glanced away nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Right. Should I come along, or? She hesitated briefly, pride wrestling fiercely with the subtle relief she felt at the idea of not going alone, especially now. She hated herself for needing him, even slightly. Finally, she muttered quietly, trying to appear nonchalant, come if you want. I don't care. He nodded quickly, clearly relieved. Okay, let's go then. Satsuki moved silently toward the door, careful to keep her expression unreadable, though internally she was still shaken. She'd allowed herself to forget her real purpose here, even briefly, and now Orochimaru was watching closely. One misstep, one sign of hesitation, and she'd pay dearly. Yet as Naruto fell into step beside her, offering a gentle, reassuring smile she pointedly ignored, she couldn't fully suppress the tiny warmth that flickered briefly in her chest. She clenched her fists tightly, forcing her resolve back into place. She couldn't afford distractions, no matter how tempting they might be. Late morning, Ebisa Town Market, Dulpav. The streets of Ebisa bustled with life, the aroma of sizzling skewers and fried sweets lingering thick in the air. Colorful fabric stalls and open-air vendors lined the market square. Tourists wandered aimlessly, and local shopkeepers called out to passers-by with the kind of performative charm that made Ebisa infamous. Satsuki walked a few paces ahead of Naruto, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Despite the loose fit of his shirt and the way it draped awkwardly over her frame, she moved with practiced elegance, posture stiff and unreadable. Naruto trailed behind, hands shoved in his pockets, glancing between her and the stalls around them. She hadn't said a word since they left the inn. He didn't push. She paused at a small clothing stall tucked between two larger shops. It was quieter here, shaded from the heavier foot traffic. Simple tunics, traveling gear, and light armor were neatly arranged on racks. Satsuki flicked through them efficiently, her movements mechanical but focused. Naruto kept his distance, hovering just within earshot but respectfully outside the stall. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, always watching, always waiting, but never prying. Satsuki could feel his gaze, and it irritated her more than she cared to admit. Not because it was intrusive, but because it wasn't. He wasn't looking at her like she was broken. He was just waiting. Like he trusted her to decide something on her own. That made it worse. She pulled out a dark long-sleeved shirt and held it to herself thoughtfully. It was plain, practical, her style. She found a matching pair of pants and turned sharply toward Naruto, expression guarded. Will this do? Naruto blinked, caught off guard. Huh? Yeah, that looks more like you. Satsuki narrowed her eyes slightly, but he wasn't mocking her. His voice was genuine. She turned away quickly. Good. Then go ask the vendor how much. Naruto approached the merchant while Satsuki moved behind a makeshift curtain to change. As she dressed, she tried not to think about how strangely normal this all felt. She emerged minutes later in her new outfit, adjusting the collar as she approached him. The clothes fit well, dark, fitted, and unmistakably hers. She looked more like the shinobi she used to be. But something in her eyes had changed. Even Naruto saw it. That's definitely more you, he said with a soft smile. She nodded once. Let's go. As they turned to leave the stall, Naruto's eyes caught movement across the square. There, half hidden behind a gaggle of laughing women, sat a tall man in a red cloak. White hair, familiar posture, Jiraiya. He was tipping back a cup of sake, already red-faced, regaling his audience with some exaggerated tale, his arms flailing like a stage performer. The women around him clung to his every word, laughing at all the right moments. Naruto's heart thumped once, hard. He froze, but he said nothing. Satsuki paused a few steps ahead, glancing back. What is it? Naruto blinked, eyes narrowing slightly before forcing a light grin. Nothing, just thought I saw something weird. Satsuki arched a brow, unconvinced, but didn't press. You're always seeing weird things. Naruto chuckled. Yeah, probably. They disappeared into the crowd, their figures soon swallowed by the stream of market-goers. Across the square, Jiraiya took a sip from his cup without looking up. The laughter around him continued, but his gaze had subtly shifted, hidden beneath half-lidded eyes and a lazy smile. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But for just a second, the corner of his mouth curled into something far sharper than his usual grin. The walk back was quiet. The market's noise faded behind them, replaced by the low murmur of distant crowds and the rustling of fabric in the breeze. Satsuki walked just ahead of Naruto, not speaking, her new clothes blending her more naturally into the flow of the village. But her shoulders were stiff, tense in that way only Naruto would notice now. He followed a step behind, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the back of her head. His thoughts weren't on her clothes, or the awkward moment with the vendor, or even her usual snappy tone. They were on Jiraiya. He pushed the thought aside as they climbed the steps to the small, quiet inn. Satsuki paused at the door, hesitating before unlocking it. Naruto caught up beside her, voice gentle. You okay? She didn't look at him. Fine. He nodded, not pushing. The door creaked open and they stepped inside. The room was small and quiet again, the way they'd left it. Faint afternoon light spilled through the thin curtains, casting soft shadows across the walls. Satsuki went to the edge of the bed and sat slowly, her back still to him. She didn't speak, didn't move. Just sat in silence, fingers fidgeting subtly with the hem of her new sleeve. Naruto watched her for a moment, then glanced down at the bag of leftover food in his hands. "I got you something," he said. "Some of those dumplings you looked at earlier. Figured. You didn't say anything, but you kinda stared at them like they insulted your clan." She turned slightly, one brow raising. "I did not." "You totally did," he said, grinning. It was like 3 full seconds. I counted. There was a brief flicker at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a smile, but it wasn't nothing. She turned away again. "I guess I'll eat later." Naruto placed the bag gently on the table. He should have left it there. Should have let the moment breathe. But instead, he asked, quieter now, "You've been different since this morning." Satsuki didn't move, didn't respond at first. Then, just as softly, "So have you." That made him pause. He walked over to the window and leaned against the frame, gazing out at the rooftops. For a while, neither of them spoke. The air between them was neither warm nor cold, just filled with too many things left unsaid. Finally, Naruto broke the silence. "I need to step out for a bit." Satsuki turned slightly. "Where?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Just need to check on something." There was a long pause before she said, quietly, "You're going to him, aren't you?" Naruto looked back, surprised she figured it out so quickly. She didn't need to say Jiraiya's name. The weight in her voice said enough. "Yeah," he admitted. "I should at least let him know I'm alive." She didn't respond right away. Then, "Will he stop you?" Naruto looked at her carefully, searching her expression. "No." She turned away again, and this time there was something uneasy in the set of her jaw. Naruto moved to the door, hand on the knob. "I'll be back before dark." She didn't look at him, but he saw her nod once. As the door clicked shut behind him, Satsuki sat in the silence he left behind, her eyes fixed on nothing. The moment Naruto stepped foot into the lobby, the faint shimmer of chakra flickered in front of him. Poof! His shadow clone dispelled in a puff of smoke, flooding him with dull memories of pacing, stretching, and staring out the window doing absolutely nothing. He blinked once, then sighed. So much for staying off the radar. Outside, on the shaded hotel patio, Jiraiya lounged at a table with their client, Tiki, the rotund political envoy. He still had that same polished grin and expensive robes that looked too clean for a man on vacation. Jiraiya spotted Naruto first and waved him over with a sake cup in hand. "Look who finally crawled out of his room." Naruto forced a grin and approached. "Was meditating." Tiki laughed, patting his round belly. "Is that what they call it now?" Jiraiya gestured to the empty seat. "Sit. Eat. Your plate's still warm. Well, it was an hour ago." Naruto took the seat, keeping his smile polite. His stomach grumbled louder than he wanted to admit. He hadn't actually eaten much since morning, and the smell of grilled fish and steamed rice didn't make resisting easier. He started eating quickly, efficient, focused. Between bites, he added, "Didn't realize we had a meeting." Tiki chuckled. "We didn't. Just felt like enjoying the company of Konoha's finest." "And the sake," Jiraiya added, tipping back his cup. Naruto didn't reply. He kept his eyes on his plate, chewing faster than normal. Jiraiya leaned back, lazily watching clouds drift overhead. "You know, you seem different, kid." Naruto paused, chopsticks halfway to his mouth. "Different?" "Yeah." Jiraiya shrugged. "More energy in you. Kinda weird, honestly, especially after how grumpy you were before we got here." Naruto blinked. "I wasn't grumpy." "Sure," Jiraiya said, smirking. "You sulked for 2 whole days. I thought about exercising your room." Tiki laughed again, clearly enjoying himself. Naruto gave a weak smile and resumed eating. "Anyway," Jiraiya continued, "this town's not bad, huh? Food's good, views are great, and the nightlife, phew. Tell me you've at least looked around." Naruto glanced up. "A little." Jiraiya narrowed one eye playfully. "You better. You're at prime girl chasing age. You'd be wasting this mission if you don't flirt with at least one barmaid." Naruto rolled his eyes. "That's your department. Don't knock it till you try it," Jiraiya said, raising his cup like a toast. "Mark my words. Nothing hones a shinobi's instincts like surviving rejection." Naruto barked a laugh despite himself, then quickly returned to his food. The rest of the meal passed slowly. Tiki rambled about trade agreements and obscure noble gossip. Jiraiya threw in the occasional joke, sometimes at Naruto's expense, sometimes at the client's. Naruto smiled and nodded when he needed to, but his foot tapped restlessly beneath the table. Time dragged. The sun shifted angles. More food came and went. He checked the sky once, then again. Jiraiya caught him the third time. Got somewhere to be? Naruto froze for half a second, then shook his head quickly. Nah, just wasn't expecting to be here this long. Jiraiya grinned. Time flies when you're stuck entertaining politicians, huh? Tiki raised a glass. I take offense. No, you pay offense, Jiraiya replied smoothly. That's why we're still smiling. Even Naruto cracked a smirk at that. But as the afternoon wore on and the sun inched closer to the horizon, Naruto's smile faded. He was still at this table. Still wasting hours. Still not back at the quiet inn where someone else was waiting. Someone who probably thought he wasn't coming back. Afternoon to midnight. Hotel lounge, Naruto Pav. It started with a second plate of food. Then a third round of drinks. Then Tiki decided he wanted to share the details of every political marriage he'd ever brokered in Fire Country, complete with dates and clan names Naruto didn't recognize or care about. And Naruto was still there. He sat at the table, back straight, hands folded neatly in his lap, nodding occasionally like a good shinobi in front of a client and his master. But inside, he was screaming. The sun slipped lower, painting the walls of the lounge in gold and orange. Jiraiya, who'd moved on to his second bottle of sake by now, looked like he had absolutely no intention of leaving. And then she told him, I'm not marrying a man who can't even open a scroll without asking his advisor how to read the seal. Tiki burst into laughter at his own story. Jiraiya joined in with a wide, open-mouthed cackle, slapping the table hard enough to rattle the plates. Naruto chuckled politely, even though he hadn't heard a single word of the punchline. He stole a glance toward the sky beyond the balcony. The sun had dipped low now, nearly out of sight. His knee bounced under the table. He imagined the room back at the smaller inn. Quiet, dimly lit. Satsuki sitting on the bed, legs crossed, arms folded, waiting for him to come back like he said he would. He imagined her checking the window. He imagined her not checking anymore. Something on your mind, kid? Jiraiya asked, looking over lazily, twirling his cup between two fingers. Naruto blinked. No, just tired. Peeved, Jiraiya snorted. Tired at your age? You're wasting your youth. This town's alive. You should be sneaking into dance halls, not sulking at this table. Tiki grinned and clinked his cup with Jiraiya's. See? This one gets it. Naruto smiled thinly. I'll keep that in mind. They kept talking. Dinner turned into more drinks. More drinks turned into card games. Card games turned into a storytelling contest, which Naruto couldn't escape because somehow, he had now become the subject. Jiraiya smacked his back at least 5 times during this period, each time pretending it was encouragement, each time nearly knocking the air out of his lungs. And still, he stayed. Because leaving now would make Jiraiya ask questions. Would make Tiki suspicious. And that risked exposing more than just himself. So, he nodded, smiled, laughed when it was expected. Pretended to care about who owned the 5th largest trade fleet in the Western Sea. Pretended that he didn't feel like he was watching the sun go out 1 minute at a time. Hours later, lounge balcony, late evening. It was well past dinner now. The lounge had emptied of most guests. The lanterns on the balcony were lit, flickering gently in the night air. Jiraiya sat sprawled sideways in his chair, robes loosened and one sandal kicked off. Tiki was half asleep on a cushioned bench, still holding a half-empty cup and mumbling about zoning laws. Naruto sat very, very still. His plate was empty. His tea was cold. His patience was gone. And still, he waited. Jiraiya's eyes drifted shut. His head tilted. He let out one deep, unbothered sigh, and then began snoring. Naruto didn't move for a full 30 seconds, just to be sure. Then, slowly, he stood. No creak in the chair. No shift in the tableware. Silent. Tiki didn't stir. Jiraiya gave a particularly loud snore and muttered something about the bathhouse incident. Naruto exhaled through his nose. Finally. Midnight. Ebisa streets, Naruto Pav. The streets were nearly empty now. The nighttime noise had faded into a soft hush, broken only by the distant clinking of glasses and the echo of sandals slapping stone. Naruto moved fast, cloak drawn, hood up. The lamps overhead blurred as he sped through the side alleys. Each step was laced with dread. He'd said he'd be back before dark. It was well past midnight. He reached the edge of the quiet inn in minutes, paused just outside the door, took one deep breath, then stepped inside, and froze. The room was dark. The window was slightly open. The bed was empty. The room was dark, silent. The window still half open, the curtains rustling gently with the breeze. Naruto stood frozen in the doorway. He'd stayed too long. Overnight, streets of Ebisa. He didn't shout her name. There was no point. If she didn't want to be found, yelling wouldn't change that. But he searched, street by street, rooftop to rooftop. He moved through alleys lit only by flickering lamps, through food markets now shuttered and silent, through residential blocks where no one spared him a second glance. Every rooftop jump, every sprint down a narrow path, brought hope that maybe he'd catch her scent. Her chakra, anything, but there was nothing. At some point during the night, the clouds rolled in again. The rain didn't fall hard, just steady, soaking through his clothes, clinging to his skin like guilt. He ducked under awnings, scaled balconies, peeked into windows, checked every spot they'd walked past that morning. Nothing. He found a half-eaten rice bun sitting on a stone wall near a quiet alley and stared at it for a full minute. Was that hers? He didn't know. He moved on. The city slowly started waking around him. Bakers opening shutters, the smell of steamed bread rising in the morning mist. But the sun brought no relief. It just reminded him of how long he'd been gone. Morning. Outskirts of Ebisa, Naruto Pav. Jiraiya was waiting. Naruto showed up at the field on time. Just barely, hood pulled low, cloak still damp, boots caked in mud. Jiraiya looked him up and down with a neutral expression, hands on his hips. "You look like hell," he said casually. Naruto didn't answer. He dropped his bag onto the ground and stood in place. Jiraiya didn't press. He just stepped back and clapped his hands once. "All right then, let's get to work. You want to be strong enough to protect people? Then get moving." Training. Several grueling hours later. Naruto's muscles burned. His lungs felt like they were lined with sandpaper. Every chakra control exercise made his vision blur. Shadow clone drills felt like trying to sprint through water. He couldn't focus. Not really. Jiraiya barked instructions. Naruto followed them, but everything he did was slower, sloppier, one beat behind. After he face planted during a wall-running sprint, Jiraiya finally walked over and nudged him with his foot. "You're off today," he said, still not sounding mad. "Just observing." Naruto rolled onto his back, panting. "Didn't sleep. Because of your training, right?" Jiraiya said, squinting slightly. Naruto didn't answer. Jiraiya stood up and stretched, cracking his back. "Well, tough luck. This was the one day I felt like teaching you something real. You better remember that next time." Naruto grunted and pushed himself to his feet, even though his body screamed at him not to. Midnight. Return to the inn, Naruto Pav. It was past midnight again when he finally made it back. He barely remembered the walk. Just the blur of lanterns and his own footsteps echoing too loudly in his ears. His legs were jelly. His shirt clung to him with dried sweat. His hands were scraped raw. He reached the inn, pushed open the door with trembling fingers. And froze. The lamp on the table was still off. But the window had been closed. And the bed looked different. Not made. Sheets slightly rumpled. He stepped inside slowly, heart thudding. He didn't call out, didn't ask. He just closed the door behind him. And for a few seconds, he stood there, wet, broken, exhausted, hoping that when he turned around, he wouldn't be alone. Naruto stepped fully inside the room, shutting the door quietly behind him. The soft click echoed louder than he expected. His eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Just enough moonlight filtered through the curtain to show him what he'd been hoping for, and dreading. Satsuki sat in the chair by the small table, legs crossed, arms resting lightly over one knee. Her posture was still, straight, deliberate. She was waiting, her eyes opened slowly, already on him. No anger, no relief, just unreadable silence. Naruto swallowed thickly. He didn't speak, didn't move. His body screamed for rest, but he stood frozen just inside the door, dripping sweat, dirt caking his sleeves, cuts on his hands barely clotted. Satsuki didn't blink, didn't look away. The silence was heavy. Tension curled in the space between them, thicker than the air, sharper than a blade. Naruto shifted his weight. "You're here." She said nothing. His voice cracked slightly as he tried again, softer. "I thought you left." Still nothing. Not even a twitch of expression. He rubbed the back of his neck, flinching slightly at the sting of dried blood under his nails. "I wanted to come back earlier," he said quietly. "I tried. Jiraiya, the client, everything just dragged." She didn't break eye contact. "I looked for you," he added, a little more desperate. "All night. I didn't sleep." You said you'd be back before dark." Her voice was quiet. Even. Naruto froze. He opened his mouth to explain, but then closed it. There wasn't anything he could say that didn't sound hollow. The silence stretched. Finally, Satsuki stood. She moved past him without brushing his shoulder, walked toward the bed, and sat on the edge. She didn't tell him to leave. She didn't tell him to stay. She just sat there, back to him, her head slightly lowered. Naruto stood a moment longer, drained, hollow, angry at himself. Then slowly, he sank down to the floor, back against the wall. The room was small, but the space between them felt impossibly wide. And neither of them crossed it. The silence stretched until it nearly collapsed in on itself. Then, without turning around, Satsuki spoke again, low and sharp. "You stink." Naruto blinked. She reached beside the bed, grabbed a neatly folded bundle of fabric, and stood. With precise steps, she walked over to him, dropped the clothes in his lap, and turned away again. The same orange shirt and pants he'd loaned her days ago. "They're washed," she added, almost as an afterthought. Naruto stared down at them. They smelled faintly like soap. Faintly like her. He looked up. "You didn't have to shower," she cut in flatly. "Before the floor starts rotting." She sat back on the bed, legs crossed again, arms folded tightly, face averted this time. Naruto didn't argue. He got up slowly, limbs groaning in protest, and stepped into the small bathroom. The water was cold at first, biting, but it jolted him awake more than it hurt. Dirt and sweat ran off in dull streaks. His hands stung under the stream, cuts raw and reddened. He didn't realize how long he stood there until the mirror fogged and the ache in his spine dulled to numbness. When he finally stepped out, towel draped over his shoulders and old clothes back on his frame, the room was dim and quiet. Satsuki hadn't moved, still sitting on the bed, still facing away. He cleared his throat. "Thanks for not locking me out." She didn't respond. Naruto sighed and crossed to the corner of the room, sitting on the floor again with his back to the opposite wall. His eyes closed almost immediately, every muscle in his body giving up the moment he stopped moving. But just before sleep claimed him, he heard her shift. Sheets rustled. Then silence again. But this time, it didn't feel quite as cold. Naruto stepped out of the bathroom, rubbing the back of his head with a towel. His skin was raw from the cold water, and he felt like his limbs might just give out at any second. The room was dim, moonlight still drifting in through the curtains. Satsuki sat on the bed again, but now she was watching him, not in judgment, just watching. Her expression unreadable. He hesitated, unsure what to say. The silence hung, stretching longer. Then she stood. Naruto blinked as she moved past him, saying nothing, her footsteps soft against the wooden floor. She crossed to the small kitchenette tucked into the corner of the room. He stayed where he was, watching her from behind as she opened a cabinet, pulled out a chipped ceramic teapot and two mismatched cups. The kettle clicked softly as she set it on the small stove, and soon, the quiet hiss of heating water filled the space. She still didn't say a word. Naruto sat down cross-legged near the low table, towel still slung around his shoulders, eyes never leaving her. When the water finally boiled, she poured the tea, precise, careful movements. First into one cup, then the other. She brought both over and placed them on the table between them. Then she sat down across from him. No eye contact, no dramatic sigh, just tea. Naruto blinked down at the cup. Steam rose between them, curling and drifting in the cold air. He reached out and picked it up, fingers brushing the ceramic. It was warm, steadying. He sipped. The quiet between them shifted. Not tense anymore, just tired. Lived in, shared. Satsuki wrapped her hands around her own cup and took a sip, her eyes half-lidded, focused on nothing. Naruto didn't press her, didn't thank her, didn't ask where she'd gone or why she'd come back. And she didn't offer it. But when he set the cup down, and she refilled it without looking up. The tea grew cooler between them, but neither seemed eager to break the spell of shared quiet. Naruto finally shifted, elbows on the table, turning the cup in his hands. "How many days is it now?" he asked, voice low. Satsuki glanced up, her gaze sharp. "Until what?" He hesitated, lips quirking in a tired smile. "Until the week's over. You leaving? Or not?" A silence, heavier than before. Satsuki looked away. Naruto tried to keep his tone light, but the worry crept in. "I haven't kept track, but it feels short." She considered him for a moment. "It's been 3 days." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "So, 4 left." She nodded, sipping her tea, not meeting his eyes. Naruto stared at her, a question forming and dying on his lips more than once. Finally, he found something neutral, something real. "What have you been working on?" he asked softly. "I mean, these past couple years. Techniques. Training. You always got ahead of me before. I'm kinda curious." Satsuki studied him, searching for any hint of mockery, but found none. She answered simply. "Mostly chakra control. Genjutsu. A little sword work." She paused, glancing at her hands. "Lightning, too." Naruto's lips twitched. "I noticed." A ghost of a smirk crossed her face, gone in a second. He leaned in, tone more playful. "Can you show me?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, almost challenging, "You'd have to keep up." Naruto huffed a laugh, feeling the knot in his chest loosen just a little. "Maybe after a night's sleep," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "Or 2. She rolled her eyes faintly. Typical. But her voice wasn't cold anymore. For the first time in days, Naruto let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, the space between them could shrink. Just a little. Satsuki set her cup down gently. "You didn't have to chase me." "I did," Naruto replied without hesitation. She looked at him again, something unreadable flickering in her expression. "You could have gone back to your training. Or followed Jiraiya. Or stayed out of this." "I didn't want to," he said simply. She was quiet for a long moment, then leaned back slightly, one hand resting on her knee. "And what do you want now?" Naruto looked at her carefully, the tired smile falling into something softer, more sincere. "I want to know if there's still anything left of you I can reach," he said. "That's all." Satsuki didn't flinch, but she didn't speak, either. The answer didn't come. Maybe it wouldn't come, not now. Maybe not ever. But she didn't shut him out. And that was enough. "I'll show you something," she said at last. Naruto blinked. "Now?" "Tomorrow," she clarified, standing slowly. "If you're not too busy pretending to train." He snorted. "Hey, I'm doing my best out there. You try running laps on no sleep after babysitting an old perv and a politician all day." She raised an eyebrow. "You act like it's harder than what I went through." He narrowed his eyes. "What did you go through?" She turned away. "Another time." He didn't push. She stopped at the edge of the bed, resting her hand lightly on the bed frame. Without turning, she said, "You'll take the floor again." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Unless you've suddenly learned how to sleep without flailing." He exhaled a quiet laugh. "Guess I haven't." She said nothing more, just slipped under the blanket with a controlled, silent grace, her back to him. Naruto pulled the spare blanket from the corner, settling down near the wall. The floor was cold and hard, but it didn't matter. Not tonight. As he lay back and stared up at the wooden ceiling, he heard the soft rustle of the bedsheets behind him. Not a word between them. But she hadn't asked him to leave. Next morning, early light, Satsuki Pav. The sky outside had barely begun to brighten, casting a soft gray wash over the floorboards. Satsuki stood at the window, arms crossed as she watched the town slowly stir to life. The faint clatter of vendors setting up stalls echoed distantly, still muffled by morning fog. Behind her, Naruto stirred. He was still curled up under the spare blanket, hair sticking up in several directions, breathing slow and uneven. She stared for a second longer than necessary before turning away. She remembered when he was shorter than her. Lighter. Easy to knock around, easier to ignore. Now, she glanced down at her own reflection in the window, then back to him. He'd grown, not just in height, though that was obvious, but in the way he carried himself. His shoulders were broader, his jaw more defined, hair longer and messier than she remembered. The face was the same. The voice still rough and too loud when he forgot to measure it. But the boy from before was harder to see now. "Get up," she said calmly. Naruto groaned from under the blanket. What time is it?" "Training time." He rolled onto his back, rubbing his face. "You're kidding. I said I'd show you something," she replied flatly, grabbing her short cloak from the hook. That wasn't an offer. It's a test. He sat up slowly, blinking toward her, still fogged with sleep. You're serious? Move before I change my mind. A quiet field outside town, Dulpav. The grass was still damp underfoot, morning dew coating the blades. Mist clung low to the ground, and the distant outline of Ebisa faded behind them. Naruto stretched his arms behind his back, wincing. You really woke me up for this, huh? Satsuki stood across from him, tying her hair into a short knot. You asked. Yeah, but I thought you'd forget. I don't forget. Naruto grinned. Right. Uchiha pride. She gave him a blank look. Watch closely. In a blink, her chakra flared, controlled and cold, and her form blurred forward in a sharp flicker step. Naruto's eyes widened. The ground cracked faintly beneath her feet, her body low and balanced in a near-silent slide across the clearing. He caught the shimmer of her lightning chakra laced through her fingertips, bare, no blade needed. Satsuki stopped just short of him, inches away. Naruto hadn't even moved. Whoa! She relaxed her stance and stepped back. That's basic. That was basic? Satsuki tilted her head, voice quieter now. Orochimaru taught me more than how to kill. He taught me how to move. How to think ahead. Naruto was still staring at the disturbed patch of earth behind her. You're faster than I remember. You're slower than I expected, she said, but there was no real bite in it. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. Didn't exactly get trained like that. Jiraiya mostly just throws me into lakes and yells when I don't learn fast enough. He grinned, expecting a scoff. But Satsuki just looked at him. Not down at him, not past him, at him. You've changed, she said plainly. Naruto blinked. Huh? She glanced away. Taller. Less irritating. Slightly. He laughed. Thanks, I guess? She folded her arms again. Your chakra control's still sloppy. I can sense it wobbling from here. Well yeah, I was literally up all night, he said, stepping forward into the clearing, trying to mimic the stance she'd taken earlier. Cut me some slack. Satsuki didn't. Wider stance. Keep your weight forward. You're too heavy in the back foot. Naruto adjusted. Better. He glanced at her, a small spark of pride flickering across his face. They trained until the sun was fully up. Nothing fancy, no sparring, just movement. Footwork. Chakra shaping. The kind of rhythm you only get when two people understand each other's presence without needing to talk much. And for the first time in a long time, Naruto didn't feel like he was trying to catch up to someone who was running away. He just felt. Here, Ebisa town, late morning, a small street stall. The air was already warm, sunlight glinting off the glass lanterns strung between buildings. Satsuki followed Naruto through the winding market streets, her expression neutral, but her eyes darting over every detail. The colorful awnings, the crowd's easy laughter, the sizzle of food on open grills. Naruto stopped at a stall with a battered wooden sign and a handful of stools. The old woman behind the counter gave him a gap-toothed grin. You brought a friend today, Blondie? Satsuki took a seat next to Naruto, eyeing the pot of simmering miso soup and the plate of steamed buns on the counter. Naruto grinned. Best dumplings in town, believe me. She didn't answer, but accepted the bowl he slid her way, blowing gently on the surface before taking a sip. They ate in silence for a while. Naruto devoured 3 buns in quick succession. Satsuki picked at hers, but didn't complain. The steady bustle of the morning market washed over them, comfortable and oddly safe. Naruto broke the silence first. So, you ever think about just staying somewhere like this? Not as a ninja, just as yourself? Satsuki gave him a sidelong glance, unimpressed. You'd go crazy after a week. He shrugged, mouth full. Maybe, but you? I think you could get used to it. She considered that, then returned her attention to her food. I don't think I'd know what to do with myself. Naruto snorted. Eat more dumplings, obviously. She almost smiled. When they finished, Naruto paid over Satsuki's half-hearted protest, and the stall owner pressed 2 candies into their hands, for good luck. Satsuki pocketed hers without comment. Marketplace. The sun climbed higher as they left the food stall behind, blending into the meandering stream of townsfolk. Ebisa was in full motion, bright festival banners flapping, vendors hawking sweets and lanterns, children darting between grown-up legs. At first, Satsuki kept her distance, eyes narrowed against the press of people. But the street ahead constricted, the crowd swelling as a troupe of drummers rolled past. For a moment, the surge threatened to pull them apart. Then, without warning, Naruto's hand closed firmly around hers. She tensed, startled, but didn't jerk away. Instead, he pulled her along, ducking under arms and weaving through a maze of festival-goers, his grip warm and solid. "Keep up," he called over his shoulder, half grinning. "Unless you want to get flattened by that old lady with the parasol." She didn't answer, but matched his pace easily, her fingers curling just a little tighter around his palm as the press of bodies thickened. Finally, they burst through the worst of it, emerging onto a side street lined with stalls for festival games. Naruto let go of her hand almost immediately, cheeks slightly red, and shoved his hands deep into his pockets as if nothing had happened. Satsuki pretended not to notice, though she could still feel the faint heat on her skin. They paused beside a stall where prizes, plush animals, cheap fans, gaudy paper masks, dangled from the awning. Naruto's eyes lit up as he scanned the shelves. "All right, just watch, I got this," he announced, dropping a handful of coins onto the vendor's counter. First up was the ring toss. Naruto's first throw bounced off the post and landed at his feet. The next shot was so wild that a little kid a few feet away had to duck as the ring sailed by. Naruto grinned sheepishly, waving an apology as the vendor, an old man with arms crossed and thick eyebrows, sighed and flicked the ring back with a practiced toe. Satsuki folded her arms, eyebrow raised, and watched as Naruto lined up again. His shoulders rolled with a stiffness she recognized, not from nerves but from fatigue. He sent the ring spinning with a dramatic flick. It spun in the air, a perfect arc, before clattering uselessly behind the counter. "I swear this game is rigged," he muttered, glaring at the peg like it was personal. Satsuki studied his profile as he snatched up another ring, windmilling his arm for effect. This one nearly hit the awning, bouncing and skidding to a stop at her feet. She didn't bother to pick it up. She could see it in the way he moved, shoulders hunched, arm trembling slightly with each exaggerated motion, exhaustion clinging to his posture like a second skin. Even his spirit, stubborn and unyielding, couldn't quite mask the heaviness weighing down his body. He was out of rings before even grazing the post. The vendor just grunted, unimpressed. Without pausing to sulk, Naruto pressed on to the next stall, determined. "Goldfish scoop." Naruto crouched, face serious. "Watch and learn, Satsuki," he said, lowering the flimsy paper net into the water with exaggerated care. The net barely touched the surface before it ripped, sending a lone goldfish darting away. The vendor offered him another net, lips twitching in a smile. Naruto, undeterred, tried again. This time, he chased a fish in circles, his brow furrowed, but the goldfish darted out of reach at the last second, leaving a wet trail across the counter as his net disintegrated. Satsuki watched, noting the way his hand shook as he dipped the net again. Not enough rest. Pushing too hard. As always. Come on. He grabbed his third and final net, determined. This is the one. He actually managed to scoop a fish, only for the net to collapse, fish and all, back into the bowl. Water splashed across his face, droplets clinging to his whisker marks. The vendor turned away, shoulders shaking. Satsuki shook her head, deadpan. "You're only frightening them at this point." But her voice was less mocking than usual, something almost close to concern. Naruto just puffed his cheeks, already moving to the next challenge. Knock down cans. He strode up to the booth and flexed his shoulders, rolling the rubber ball in his palm like he'd watched professional pitchers do. "Ready for this?" he challenged, glancing at Satsuki. She didn't answer, but found herself watching closely as he hurled the first ball, too high. It soared, missed everything, and thumped off a wooden post behind the booth. The vendor caught it one-handed, eyes narrowing. "Maybe try aiming next time, kid," the man said. Naruto gritted his teeth, stepping back in line. "Just warming up." He fired again, this time smacking the bottom row of cans dead on. They wobbled, but stubbornly refused to fall, as if glued in place. Satsuki watched the tension in his arms, the stubborn tightness in his jaw. She remembered missions with him. The way he always kept going, never stopped to rest until he dropped. He's running on empty, she realized, and still refuses to admit it. Typical idiot. On his third try, Naruto wound up and let loose. The ball hit the top row, sending a single Ken spinning right onto the ground, unaccompanied by its neighbors. A group of kids nearby burst into giggles. Satsuki, for once, didn't hide her smirk. Even she had to admit, watching him struggle so hard, so determined, so sore, was almost endearing. Balloon darts. Next was the dart game. Naruto eyed the balloons, then rolled his shoulders, and Satsuki could see the fatigue etched in every movement. "Okay, this one's all about finesse," he declared. His first dart sailed wide, missing even the outer edge of the board. The second bounced off a balloon, failing to pop it. The third hit dead center, but the balloon, stubborn and underinflated, didn't even shudder. He stared at the dart in disbelief. By his fourth miss, he scowled, turning to Satsuki. "If I used shadow clones, we could clean up this whole booth in 2 seconds." Satsuki deadpanned, "You'd still miss." He lined up for another throw, then paused, eyeing his hand. "What if No, I shouldn't." "Don't even think about it," Satsuki cut in, voice suddenly sharp. She knew the look on his face. The urge to cheat, to break the rules with chakra just to prove a point. And, deep down, she knew it was because he wanted to win, if only to see her smile. Naruto pouted, but just a tiny Rasengan. "No." He sighed and, on his last dart, managed to hit a balloon right in the center. It popped with a sad little squeak, but the prize was a single cheap paper fan, which the vendor handed over with zero enthusiasm. Naruto tried to offer it to Satsuki, she just gave him a flat look. Coin toss. Naruto flicked the coin. It spun, hit the rim of the cup, and danced in a perfect circle, then teetered and fell off at the last second. He stared at his hand in betrayal. "Even my luck's bad today." Satsuki leaned in slightly, watching his fingers as he fumbled for another coin. "That's not luck, that's just you." Naruto tried again, tongue out, eyes squinting, but the coin simply bounced away, rolling off the booth and into the street. She watched his form, now openly studying the lines of fatigue in his posture, the slumped shoulders, the way his arm dropped heavily to his side, the stubborn light still burning in his eyes. He's running on fumes. Idiot. He'd drag his body through a war if it meant making someone laugh. Final ring toss, last try, big win. With sweat on his brow and fire in his eyes, Naruto marched back to the first stall. The crowd had thinned, the air hot, and his failures hung over him like a curse. He lined up, took a deep breath, and hurled the first ring, miss. The second one clipped the peg, spun in the air, and dropped to the ground. Satsuki, arms now loosely folded, didn't move. But she watched the set of his jaw, the stubborn tilt of his head, the resolve in his eyes despite his whole body protesting. She thought, he'll never quit. Not for anything. Naruto gripped the last ring like it was a ninja tool, focused so hard he nearly forgot to breathe. He threw. The ring arced up, hovered, clink, landed right over the peg and dropped into place. For a second, everything was silent. Even the vendor blinked. Naruto's mouth fell open. "Yes. Did you see that?" He raised both fists in victory. The vendor handed him the prize, a slightly lopsided, bright orange fox plush. Naruto beamed, turning to Satsuki with outstretched hands. But Satsuki stepped forward, cool as ever, caught him by the shirt, and tugged him away from the booth before he could say a word. "That's enough," she said. She plucked the fox from his hands and started walking off, the hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. Naruto scrambled after her, a little stunned. "Wait, hey, I thought you didn't want one." She didn't answer, but she didn't let go of the plush either, and if Naruto looked close enough, he could almost swear he saw a real smile. Backstreets and Riverside. The festival noise faded as they slipped into the quieter streets beyond the market. The sun was high but gentle here, filtered through tangled laundry lines and paper lanterns left over from last night's celebrations. The air smelled faintly of river reeds and distant sweet rice. Naruto walked a step ahead at first, but soon their pace evened out, side by side, neither leading nor following. Satsuki clutched the lopsided fox plush in one hand, her fingers curled unconsciously around its soft, uneven tail. They didn't speak at first. Their footsteps echoed against the old stones. A stray cat darted between crates, and a faded festival streamer fluttered from a fence post. Naruto broke the silence with a faint grin. "You know, for someone who didn't want a prize, you're holding onto that thing like it's a secret scroll." Satsuki blinked, then glanced down. The fox's bright orange fur stood out against her dark sleeve. She scowled, trying to play it off, and shoved the plush hastily into her bag. "It's just cheap stuffing," she muttered, eyes forward. "Don't get weird about it." Naruto's grin widened. "Hey, I get it. It's hard to resist my good luck." She shot him a look. "Your luck almost got you banned from half the festival." He snorted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, but you still let me win it for you." She didn't answer. The only sound was the river, murmuring quietly as they reached the end of the alley and turned onto the embankment path. Here, willow branches draped low, trailing into the water. Lanterns bobbed in the slow current, drifting relics from the night before. They walked in companionable silence, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Naruto nudged a pebble into the water with his sandal. "Do you ever, I dunno, think about staying in a place like this? Just walking around. No one trying to kill you. No missions." Satsuki was quiet. She stared straight ahead, jaw set. "That's not our reality," she said, voice low. Naruto shrugged, stuffing his hands in his pockets. "Doesn't mean you can't imagine it." Satsuki's gaze lingered on the water. She watched the reflection of a red lantern ripple, then fade. "Imagining it doesn't make it true." Naruto didn't answer at first. They walked another dozen paces, the air between them softening. Finally, he said, "Maybe not. But I think I'd be okay with it. Even just for a day." She gave him a sidelong glance, unreadable. "You'd get bored." He grinned, stubborn. "Not if you were there. You'd keep me on my toes." Satsuki huffed, a sound halfway to a scoff, halfway to something softer. "I'd probably vanish before breakfast." Naruto smiled at that. "Maybe, but I'd find you." A brief silence stretched. Satsuki slowed, stopping beside the old stone bridge where the river bent. She looked down, watching gold and green reflections shimmer. Naruto stopped too, kicking at the grass. "You ever get tired, Satsuki?" She hesitated, long enough for him to think she wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, "All the time." She let out a breath, almost a sigh. "But tired doesn't change anything." Naruto leaned on the bridge rail, letting the sun warm his back. "Doesn't mean you have to keep carrying everything alone, you know." Satsuki's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. For a second, Naruto thought she might snap at him. Instead, she just shook her head, voice barely audible. "You can't help people who don't want it." Naruto watched her, gentle. "You sure about that?" She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away. They stood together as a soft breeze swept down the river, carrying the last notes of festival music far in the distance. The sun glimmered on the water, and for a fleeting moment, the world felt simple, two friends on a bridge, nothing more. Satsuki finally turned, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Let's go." Naruto straightened. "Back to the inn?" She nodded. "Unless you want to lose at more games." He laughed, bright and real. "I'll take my one win and quit while I'm ahead." Side by side, they started back through the quiet streets, a little closer than before. And in Satsuki's bag, the orange fox plush peeked out, an awkward, clumsy reminder that, just for today, she hadn't let go. Ebisa Town Inn, late afternoon. The room was silent, hazy with late sunlight. Naruto slept on his side against the far wall, breath soft and even, hair sticking up messily. His jacket was draped over him like a blanket, and the faintest shadow of a smile tugged at his mouth. Satsuki sat near the window, perfectly still. Her gaze wandered, first to the street below, then back to Naruto's sleeping form. Her hand drifted, almost idly, to the hilt of her blade, fingers curling around the worn wrapping. She stayed that way for a long moment. Unmoving, no sound but Naruto's breathing. No one to witness, no one to interfere. Her hand remained on her sword, but she didn't move. A flicker of motion outside the window caught her eye. A dark bird, perched on a crooked chimney across the narrow street. Its red eyes glinted in the fading light as it scanned the rooftops, searching. For now, it hadn't noticed her. It was waiting, poised and restless, wings half spread. Satsuki watched the bird, body tense, hand still on her blade. Behind her, Naruto shifted suddenly. His eyes snapped open as if startled from a dream, breath-catching. He blinked around the room, then sat up slowly, rubbing at his eyes. Satsuki didn't move, her hand leaving the hilt only after a few steady seconds. The bird on the rooftop shifted, turning away, attention drawn elsewhere, for the moment. The golden quiet in the room returned, and Satsuki sat back, silent, as Naruto woke fully, oblivious to how close the air had grown. Satsuki seated by the window, her back rigid, gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the glass. He sat up, knuckling sleep from his eyes. Oi, Satsuki. If you stare any harder, you're gonna put a hole in that window. He tried for a grin, voice breaking the hush. She didn't react at first. He crossed the tatami, footsteps soft, and set a warm, broad hand on her shoulder. She tensed beneath the contact, only for a heartbeat, but let him rest there, unmoving. A heavy moment settled between them. Satsuki's hand rose, pale fingers closing over his, not in comfort but in fragile recognition. For a single breath, they were connected, her calloused palm pressed to his, the silence saying all the words they'd never dared to voice. Then, suddenly, she pushed his hand away, sharper than she meant, standing so abruptly her chair scraped against the floorboards. Don't touch me when you're all sweaty, she muttered, brittle and defensive. She kept her face turned to the window, shadows flickering across her eyes. Naruto's mouth twisted into a lopsided smile, hiding the flash of hurt. Guess you're finally awake, huh? Good, I was starting to think you'd turned into one of those creepy festival masks. He shrugged on his orange jacket, voice too cheerful. Let's go. If we wait too long, all the good food'll be gone. But Satsuki didn't move to follow. Instead, she stepped away, jaw set. You always do that, she said quietly. Pretend it's fine. Pretend you can just drag me along, and it'll all work out. Naruto blinked, thrown off. I just thought maybe. She spun on him, anger suddenly flaring. You thought what? That you could save me with ramen and stupid games? That if you smiled enough, I'd forget everything? He recoiled a step, words catching. Satsuki, that's not. She cut him off, voice cracking. You don't get it. You never did. You didn't lose everything. You never had to watch your family die, over and over, every time you closed your eyes. You never woke up with your whole life burned away and the only thing left is the need to get stronger, strong enough to kill the person who took it all. Her hands shook, balled into fists at her sides. Don't talk to me about pain. Don't pretend you know. Naruto's own fists tightened. I know what it's like to be alone, Satsuki. I grew up. She snarled, eyes flashing. You had Iruka. You had Kakashi. You had friends, me, before you let me go. The words hit him hard. You don't know what it's like to have your entire existence rewritten in blood and nightmares. You don't know what I see when I look in the mirror. Naruto's voice was small, almost pleading. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here. I never stopped. Satsuki laughed, hollow and broken. You're weak, Naruto. You're not strong enough to follow me where I'm going. No one in Konoha is. That's why I left. Her voice rose. Orochimaru gives me power. He makes me stronger. You'd never understand that need. He shook his head, desperate. He's using you. He's only ever going to take from you, Satsuki. He's not family. He doesn't care about you, not really. Let us help. Let me help. She whirled on him, tears bright in her eyes but refusing to fall. Help? She spat. You couldn't even keep up with me back then, and you're still lagging behind now. You're wasting your time. He stepped closer, refusing to back down. Maybe I am. Maybe I'll chase you forever. But I meant what I said before. I'm not giving up on you, Satsuki. Not ever. I'll chase you to the ends of the world if I have to. You're my friend, more than that, and I can't just walk away. The words echoed, jagged and raw. Satsuki's breath shuddered out of her, caught between fury and something dangerously close to grief. Stop it, she shouted. Just stop. I don't want you here. I can't, her voice broke. I can't do this with you around. All you do is make it hurt more. Naruto looked like he wanted to say more, but his eyes suddenly glazed, his clone's dispersal hit him like a jolt. A rush of festival noise and the flash of Jiraiya's white hair. He hesitated, torn. Satsuki. She turned away, voice cold as steel. Leave, now. Don't make me say it again. He lingered, heartbreak carved across his face. I'm not giving up on you. I'll come back, I promise. But she kept her back to him, shoulders stiff, trembling with the effort of not falling apart. At last, Naruto turned and slipped through the door, closing it softly behind him. Satsuki let herself collapse, her mask breaking, the pain and anger swirling in the silence he left behind. Naruto raced down the hallway, every step weighted by the storm of their words, the memory of her agony chasing him into the coming night. Outside the inn, dusk. Naruto stormed down the stairs and out into the evening, breath hot in his chest, fists clenched. He needed air, needed to move. The festival's distant drums barely reached him here, where the street ran quiet and gold lanterns swung lazily overhead. He rounded the corner of the inn, trying to shake Satsuki's words from his head, and nearly crashed into a familiar, far too familiar, presence. Jiraiya lounged against a lamppost directly in front of the inn, arms crossed, a grin plastered across his face. The old man's white hair looked almost silver in the fading light. "Well, if it isn't the elusive apprentice himself," Jiraiya drawled. "I was starting to think you'd been kidnapped by festival dancers, or maybe just lost your way in all those food stalls." Naruto, caught off guard, tried to pull his usual face. "Gimme a break, Arrow Sennin. I just went out for some fresh air." Jiraiya's eyes narrowed with practiced laziness, a little too practiced. "Oh? You always go out looking like someone dumped you in the river? You've been missing a lot these days, kid. You up to something I should know about?" Naruto looked away, scratching his head. "Nothing like that. Just, lots on my mind, I guess." Jiraiya smirked, letting the silence stretch. Sure. Festivals make everyone a little weird, right? Some people get nostalgic, some people start talking to themselves on rooftops. His gaze lingered for just a second too long. Naruto fidgeted, knowing that Jiraiya was digging, but refusing to give him the satisfaction. "You're the one who likes rooftops. You're probably just mad I found the best spot before you." Jiraiya barked a laugh, but his eyes didn't leave Naruto's face. "Yeah, well, word around town is you've been a little extra sneaky lately. And you know what else is weird? Heard a funny rumor just now. They say there's been an Uchiha sighting a few towns over. Crazy, right? Guess people'll say anything these days." He paused, watching Naruto's reaction closely, a little too closely. Naruto kept his face blank, but his pulse thudded in his ears. "Yeah, crazy. Like anyone'd be dumb enough to come back around here." Jiraiya shrugged, pushing off the post. "Maybe. Or maybe they're not dumb, just desperate." He gave Naruto a meaningful look, all traces of joking gone for a heartbeat. "Watch yourself out there, brat. Don't do anything I wouldn't do." The grin returned, wider than ever. "And don't eat all the dumplings without me." Without waiting for a reply, Jiraiya started off toward the lights of the festival, whistling tunelessly. Naruto stood rooted for a moment, heart pounding, before shoving his hands in his pockets and heading off into the crowd. Jiraiya's warning and Satsuki's words both echoing in his mind. Ebisa Town Inn, midnight. Naruto lay sprawled across the narrow bed, arms thrown over his eyes, trying to block out everything, the chill in the air, the ache in his chest, the echo of Satsuki's voice burning in his ears. He'd made up his mind. He had to. He'd replayed their argument 100 times already, searching for something, anything, that would make it easier. "Let her go. Just let her go. You've done enough." He turned over, clutching the pillow tight against his chest. "She's right," he muttered into the dark. "She doesn't need me. She doesn't want me." He tried to believe it. Forced himself to whisper it again and again, hoping if he said it enough it would turn true. He pictured himself walking away, packing his things, leaving Ebisa Town without another word. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe it would set her free. Maybe, for once, he could stop being so selfish. His throat closed tight. It felt like tearing something out by the roots. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself to sleep, to accept the decision he'd made. He imagined himself training harder, focusing on the mission, returning to Jiraiya's side. Pushing Satsuki into a part of his heart he could forget, seal away, like all the other pain. But every time he drifted close to sleep, the images returned. Satsuki, alone in a shadowed street, her face blank, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and old fear. The way her shoulders curled, just slightly, when she thought no one was watching. The memory of her hand, trembling against his. The way she pushed him away, but not at first. He tried to see her as she'd asked. A stranger, walking away, a chapter closed. But in the dark, he saw her as she was that night, fragile, furious, so alive and so close to breaking. He remembered all the nights he'd spent alone as a kid, no one to talk to, nobody even knowing he existed. He remembered how every smile, every bit of warmth he'd found, had saved him, just a little, each time. He told himself he was strong enough to walk away. If you love her, you'll let her go, he thought. You'll let her find her own way, even if that means never seeing her again. But each time he thought he could do it, another memory surfaced. Satsuki, years ago, laughing at something he'd said, sunlight caught in her hair. Satsuki, bleeding in the rain, refusing his hand but not moving away. Satsuki, now, staring out that window like she was already gone, and the world had left her behind. Naruto rolled onto his side, heart pounding. He couldn't breathe. Is this really what she wants? Is this really what's best? He pictured himself leaving, and the image twisted. He saw her lost in the darkness, utterly alone, reaching for help that never came. He saw himself as a child again, clutching his knees to his chest, wishing someone would come back for him. No, he whispered, shaking, eyes burning. No, damn it, no. He sat up, raking his hands through his hair, feeling every doubt, every wound. He wanted to be strong enough to walk away, for her sake. He wanted to be selfless, the way heroes in stories were. But the idea of abandoning her, of letting her vanish into the darkness, felt worse than anything else. He couldn't do it, not now, not ever. I'd rather be wrong and try, than do nothing and lose her forever. He stumbled to his feet, body thrumming with nerves and exhaustion and something like hope. I'm not strong, I'm not wise, I'm just me, but I can't let her be alone. As the first gray hints of dawn broke through the curtains, Naruto made his choice, not because he thought he was the answer, but because he refused to be another empty place in her life. He would fight for her, even if it hurt, even if it was selfish. Because someone had to stay, no matter how many times she pushed him away. I'm not giving up on you, Satsuki. Not ever. Even if you hate me for it. I'll chase you to the end of the world if I have to. And that promise, old as childhood, battered and stubborn, was what carried him out the door, back into the uncertain dawn, to try again. Dawn, the in-room. The first pale threads of dawn crept through the curtains as Naruto pushed open the door, heart hammering against his ribs. He'd spent the entire walk back preparing himself for emptiness, an unmade bed, an open window, the hollow ache of abandonment. Instead, he found her. Satsuki sat cross-legged on the floor beside the window, back straight, hands resting loosely on her knees. She wasn't looking at him, wasn't looking at the window either. Her gaze seemed fixed on something invisible in the middle distance, dark eyes reflecting nothing. She'd changed clothes, back into her own dark outfit, practical and clean. Her hair was tied back severely. Every line of her posture screamed control, distance, walls rebuilt higher and thicker than before. But she was here. Naruto closed the door quietly and stood there, unsure. The memory of their fight hung in the air like smoke, her voice cracking as she screamed at him, the hurt in her eyes, the way she'd told him to leave. He'd expected to find the room empty. Expected her to be gone, vanished into the night like she had so many times before. The silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. He could hear his own breathing, could hear the distant sounds of the town beginning to wake up below. A cart rattled over cobblestones. Someone called out a greeting in the street. "You came back," she said finally, not turning to look at him. "Yeah, I thought." She paused, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter." Naruto stayed by the door, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Every instinct told him to rush over, to start talking, to fill the silence with explanations or apologies or desperate attempts to fix things between them. But her words from yesterday echoed in his mind. "You always do that. Pretend it's fine. Pretend you can just drag me along." So he waited. Minutes passed. The light grew stronger, casting long shadows across the tatami floor. Satsuki's breathing was controlled, measured, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers pressed just slightly into her knees. She looked like she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. He found himself cataloging the details of her presence, the way morning light caught the blue-black sheen of her hair, the precise angle of her spine, the controlled rhythm of her breathing. After so many hours expecting to find her gone, the simple fact of her existence in this space felt almost surreal. "Satsuki," he said quietly. She turned her head slightly, not looking at him but acknowledging that she'd heard. "The deal we made, the 1 week thing." He took a breath, steadying himself. "Forget it." Now she did turn to look at him, dark eyes sharp and wary. Her whole body shifted, subtle but alert. "What? I'm calling it off. The deal. You don't owe me anything." He met her gaze, trying to keep his voice steady even though his heart was racing. "You can leave whenever you want. Right now, if that's what you want." Satsuki stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for some kind of trick, some hidden manipulation. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and he could practically see her mind working, analyzing, looking for the angle he had to be playing. What's the catch? No catch. There's always a catch with you. Her voice was flat, suspicious. Not this time. He leaned back against the door, suddenly feeling exhausted. The weight of the decision, of giving up the one thing that had been keeping her here, settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. You were right about what you said yesterday. I was trying to trap you with time limits and bargains. That's not fair to you. She stood slowly, movements careful and controlled. Every line of her body radiated tension, like a coiled spring ready to release. So what, now you're just giving up? I'm letting you choose. And if I choose to leave? The question hit him like a physical blow, but he forced himself to answer honestly. The words felt like swallowing glass. Then you leave, and I don't follow you. Satsuki's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. You're lying. I'm not. Yes, you are. You've never given up on anything in your life. This is just another one of your stupid plans. She took a step toward him, voice gaining edge. What about your dream, Naruto? You always said if you can't save a friend, you can't be Hokage. So what happens now? You just give up on both? The words hit exactly where she'd aimed them. Naruto felt his carefully maintained composure waver, felt the familiar desperate urge to argue, to fight back, to prove that he wasn't giving up, that he'd never give up. Instead, he took a slow breath and really considered her question. Maybe, he said finally, I've been thinking about what saving someone actually means. Satsuki's eyebrows rose slightly. Whatever she'd expected him to say, it hadn't been that. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, maybe saving someone isn't about forcing them to come back. Maybe it's about, he struggled to find the right words. Maybe it's about making sure they have the choice. Even if they don't choose you. That's convenient philosophy. Is it? He straightened, meeting her challenging gaze. Because it doesn't feel convenient. It feels like tearing my heart out. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. And the Hokage thing? She pressed. You're just going to let that dream die? I don't know. The admission felt strange on his tongue. Maybe being Hokage isn't worth it if I have to become someone I hate to get there. Maybe the kind of person who deserves to be Hokage is someone who can let people go when they need to be let go. They stared at each other across the small room, the morning light casting everything in gold and shadow. Naruto could see the war playing out behind her eyes, suspicion battling with something that might have been surprise or even respect. I could walk out that door right now, she said, voice quieter now but still testing. Yeah, and you wouldn't stop me. No, wouldn't follow me. No. Another long silence. Satsuki moved to the window, looking out at the street below where early vendors were beginning to set up their stalls. Her reflection in the glass looked pale, almost ghostly. Why? She asked finally, voice barely above a whisper. Because you were right. About everything. His voice was quiet, honest, stripped of any pretense. I don't understand what you've been through. I don't know what it's like to lose everything, to have your whole world destroyed. And maybe I've been so focused on bringing you back that I forgot to ask what you actually wanted. She was quiet for so long he thought she might not respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't know what I want. That's okay. Is it? Yeah, it's okay not to know. Satsuki turned from the window, studying his face with that same intense scrutiny. He felt exposed under her gaze, like she was looking straight through him to something he wasn't even sure existed. And what do you want, Naruto? He considered the question seriously, trying to push past all the easy answers to something real. I want you to be safe. I want you to be happy. And if that means letting you go. He shrugged, trying to look casual even though the words felt like tearing something out by the roots. Then that's what I'll do. Just like that? Just like that. She shook her head slowly, something almost like wonder in her expression. I don't understand you. That makes two of us. Despite everything, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. Not quite a smile, but close. The silence that followed felt different, less brittle, less charged with unspoken accusations. Satsuki moved away from the window, her movements less rigid than they'd been since he arrived. Your stomach's growling, she observed, not looking at him. Naruto blinked, suddenly aware that she was right. He'd been too nervous to eat properly yesterday, too anxious about finding her to think about food this morning. I hadn't noticed. I had. She moved toward the door, pausing when she reached him. Her proximity made him acutely aware of the space between them. Close enough that he could smell the faint scent of soap in her hair, far enough that it felt like a chasm. There's a place nearby. It wasn't quite an invitation, wasn't quite a suggestion. Just a statement of fact that somehow felt like an opening. Okay, he said. Okay. Morning. Walking to breakfast. They stepped out of the inn together, and Naruto immediately felt the awkwardness settle over them like a blanket. Without the framework of their deal, without the structure of obligation, neither of them seemed sure how to act. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scents of baking bread and blooming flowers from the vendors setting up for the day's festival. Early risers moved past them with purpose. Merchants heading to their stalls, mothers taking children to market, old men gathering for their morning discussions in the teahouses. Satsuki walked beside him, but not too close. Her hands were clasped behind her back, and she kept glancing at him out of the corner of her eye as if trying to figure out if this was some elaborate trick. Her steps were measured, careful, like someone walking across ice they weren't sure would hold. So, Naruto said, then immediately regretted speaking. The word hung in the air between them, too loud and too forced against the natural sounds of the waking town. So, Satsuki repeated, voice flat. They walked in silence for another block. Every step felt weighted, every moment of quiet stretched too long. Naruto found himself cataloging the distance between them, 2 feet, maybe 3. Close enough to touch if he wanted to, far enough that it felt like a canyon. A group of children ran past them, chasing a ball that bounced erratically over the cobblestones. Their laughter seemed to highlight the stilted quiet between him and Satsuki. There's a place up ahead, he offered, pointing toward a small tea house tucked between 2 larger buildings. Its wooden sign was weathered but welcoming, and steam rose from its chimney into the morning air. Fine. More silence. A group of festival goers passed them, laughing and chatting about the day's events, and the contrast with their own stilted interaction was almost painful. Naruto felt hyper-aware of every sound. Their footsteps on the stone, the rustle of fabric, the way Satsuki's breathing was carefully controlled. Satsuki, don't. He stopped walking. Don't what? She stopped too, turning to face him. There was something defensive in her posture, like she was bracing for impact. Don't start apologizing. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't do that thing where you talk too much because you're nervous. I wasn't going to. Yes, you were. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. The familiar urge to fill silence with chatter, to smooth over awkwardness with forced enthusiasm, was already building in his chest. Okay, yeah, I was. I know. She started walking again, shoulders relaxing slightly. It's what you always do. They reached the tea house in continued silence, but somehow it felt less oppressive now. More honest, like they'd acknowledged the elephant in the room and could coexist with it instead of pretending it wasn't there. The tea house, tentative steps. The tea house was small and quiet, with only a few other patrons scattered at low tables. Paper screens filtered the morning light into something soft and golden. The air smelled of green tea and steamed rice, comfortable and unassuming. They chose a spot near the window, far enough from the other customers that they could speak without being overheard. The table was small, intimate in a way that felt both comforting and dangerous. Naruto ordered simply, rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables. No excessive displays, no desperate attempts to make everything perfect. Satsuki did the same, her voice polite but distant when speaking to the server. When the server left, they sat in silence again, both of them seeming to study the grain of the wooden table. The sounds of the tea house filled the space between them, quiet conversations, the clink of chopsticks against ceramic, the soft whistle of the kettle. This is weird, Naruto said finally. What is this? Us. Sitting here like. He gestured vaguely at the space between them. Like what? Like strangers. Satsuki picked up her teacup, wrapping her fingers around it for warmth. The ceramic was white with small blue flowers, simple and elegant. Maybe we are strangers. Are we? She considered the question seriously, staring into the pale green depths of her tea. I don't know who you are anymore. And you don't know who I am. The words stung because they felt true. How long had it been since they'd really known each other? Since they'd been able to predict each other's thoughts, finish each other's sentences? So what do we do about that? I don't know. Their food arrived, giving them something to focus on besides the uncomfortable weight of honesty. The server arranged the dishes with practiced efficiency, small bowls of rice, steaming soup, artfully arranged vegetables. Simple food, but prepared with care. They ate slowly, carefully, like people learning how to be around each other. Naruto found himself watching Satsuki's hands as she used her chopsticks, noting the economical precision of her movements. Everything she did seemed deliberate, controlled. The tea's good, Naruto offered after a while, immediately feeling foolish for the obvious observation. Another stretch of quiet. He tried again, grasping for something, anything, to bridge the gap between them. Do you like tea? Satsuki gave him a look that was part amusement, part exasperation. One eyebrow raised slightly, and her mouth almost curved toward a smile. Are we really going to talk about tea? I don't know what else to talk about. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. They were both shinobi, trained to read people, to find the right words in any situation. And yet here they sat, reduced to commenting on beverages because the real conversations felt too dangerous. Then maybe we don't talk. Okay, but the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like a truce, temporary and fragile, but real. They finished their meal without forcing conversation, and somehow that felt more authentic than anything they might have said. When they finished eating, Satsuki set down her chopsticks and looked at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down. Why did you really call off the deal? The question was direct, uncompromising. No politeness or social nicety to soften it. Naruto met her gaze, trying to find the right words. Because you were right. I was trying to control you, even if I didn't mean to. And that's not. He paused, searching for honesty. That's not what friends do. Is that what we are? Friends? I don't know. What do you think we are? She was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying his face as if looking for deception. I think we're two people who used to know each other. And maybe we're trying to figure out if we still can. I'd like that, he said quietly. Figuring it out, I mean. Even if the answer is no? The question hurt, but he forced himself to answer honestly. Even if the answer is no. Satsuki nodded slowly, as if filing away this information for later consideration. There was something almost scientific about the way she was approaching this, like she was conducting an experiment to see if he meant what he said. What do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do? Stop asking me what I want. Why? Because I don't know. There was frustration in her voice, but also something that might have been vulnerability. I've spent so long focused on one thing, on getting stronger, on. She trailed off, shaking her head. I don't know how to want normal things anymore. Then let's not do normal things. She looked at him curiously. What does that mean? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Mid-morning, wandering, they left the tea house without a destination, letting their feet carry them through Ebis's quieter streets. The festival preparations were in full swing elsewhere, but here the morning felt sleepy and peaceful. Old women swept their stoops, vendors arranged their wares, children played in courtyards behind half-open gates. Satsuki walked slightly ahead, not leading exactly, but not following either. Every few minutes she would pause at something. A cat sunning itself on a windowsill, an old woman hanging laundry, a child chasing soap bubbles in a courtyard. And Naruto would stop too, waiting without asking questions. There was something different about her today. Still guarded, still distant, but not actively hostile. Like she was testing the boundaries of this new dynamic they'd found themselves in. You're different, she said suddenly as they paused to watch a blacksmith working at his forge. The man's hammer rang against hot metal in a steady rhythm, sparks flying with each strike. Different how? Quieter. Less. She gestured vaguely with one hand, searching for the word. Less annoying? Less desperate. The word hit harder than he'd expected. Naruto felt something twist in his chest, a recognition of truth he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Was I that obvious? You've never been subtle about anything in your life. True. He watched the blacksmith shape red-hot metal with practiced strokes, marveling at the way raw iron could be transformed into something useful, something beautiful. I guess I figured if I tried hard enough, wanted it enough, I could force things to work out. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out if wanting something and letting it go can happen at the same time. Satsuki glanced at him, something unreadable flickering across her face. There was surprise there, and maybe something like respect. That's very philosophical for you. Yeah, well, desperate times. I thought you said you weren't desperate anymore. I lied. She almost smiled at that. Almost. The corner of her mouth twitched upward for just a moment before settling back into its neutral line. They continued walking, and gradually the silence between them began to feel less like an absence and more like a presence. Not comfortable exactly, but not unbearable either. Like they were learning a new language together, one that didn't require words. The small shrine. The streets grew narrower as they wandered deeper into the older part of town. Here the buildings pressed closer together, their upper stories nearly touching overhead. Laundry hung from wooden balconies, and the smell of cooking drifted from open windows. They came upon a small shrine tucked between two houses, barely larger than a closet. Red wooden posts supported a tiny roof, and inside sat a weathered stone statue of some minor deity. Fresh flowers had been placed at its base, and thin sticks of incense burned in a small holder, sending wisps of fragrant smoke into the morning air. Satsuki stopped, studying the shrine with an unreadable expression. "Do you believe in that sort of thing?" Naruto asked quietly. "In what? Prayers? Gods? Making wishes to stone statues?" She was quiet for a moment, then stepped closer to the shrine. From her pocket, she pulled out a few coins, the change from their breakfast, and dropped them into the offering box. The metal clinked softly in the morning quiet. "I believe in showing respect," she said simply. She bowed her head briefly, lips moving in what might have been a prayer or might have been nothing at all. Naruto found himself studying her profile. The way her dark hair fell forward to hide her expression, the delicate curve of her neck, the careful control she maintained even in this small moment of vulnerability. When she straightened and caught him staring, heat immediately flooded his cheeks. "What?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. "Nothing," he said quickly, looking anywhere but at her face. "Just, you look peaceful when you pray." Something flickered across her expression, surprise, maybe, or something softer. "Do I? Yeah, different from usual." "Different how?" "Less." He gestured vaguely, still not quite meeting her eyes. "Less like you're ready for a fight." "Maybe I'm not. Right now." When she stepped back, he took his own turn, dropping coins into the box and offering his own brief, wordless plea to whatever spirits might be listening. When he looked up, he found her watching him with curious eyes. "What did you pray for?" she asked. "I thought that was supposed to be private." "It is." "Then why are you asking?" "Because I want to know." The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. "Peace," he said finally. "For both of us." She nodded slowly, as if this was the answer she'd expected. "That's a good thing to pray for." They stood there for a moment longer, breathing in the incense smoke and listening to the quiet sounds of the town around them. Then, without discussion, they continued walking. "There's something I want to show you," Satsuki said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of decision, as if she'd just made up her mind about something. Naruto looked at her in surprise. It was the first time all day she'd initiated anything, the first time she'd expressed a want or preference. "What is it?" "You'll see." The Forgotten Garden. She led him through a maze of narrow alleys to a part of town that felt forgotten by time. The buildings here were older, more weathered, their wooden facades gray with age and weather. Moss grew in the cracks between stones, and vines crept up the walls. Behind a crumbling stone wall, partially hidden by overgrown ivy, was a small gate. The wood was dark with age, the iron hinges green with rust. Satsuki pushed it open with some effort. The hinges protested with a rusty squeal that seemed too loud in the quiet alley, and stepped inside. Naruto followed, ducking under a branch that had grown across the entrance. The garden beyond was wild and overgrown, but beautiful in its abandonment. What had once been carefully maintained paths were now barely visible beneath creeping moss and fallen leaves. Stone lanterns lay toppled among the undergrowth, their surfaces green with age. A small pond reflected the sky through a layer of lily pads and debris, and somewhere in the depths, a frog called out a lonely note. "How did you find this place?" Naruto asked, voice hushed in the green quiet. "I was looking for somewhere to hide," Satsuki said, moving deeper into the garden. Her steps were careful, reverent, as if she were entering a sacred space. Somewhere no one would think to look. She sat down on what might once have been a stone bench, now half covered in moss and decorated with tiny white flowers. After a moment's hesitation, Naruto sat at the other end, leaving space between them. The garden was full of small sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant drip of water, the buzz of insects. A butterfly landed on a nearby flower, its wings brilliant orange against the green. Hide from what? Everything. She picked up a fallen leaf, turning it over in her fingers. The veins stood out like tiny rivers against the brown surface. Do you ever get tired, Naruto? Really tired, not just sleepy, but tired of being yourself? The question caught him off guard with its honesty. It was the kind of question that demanded a real answer, not the easy deflection he might usually offer. Yeah, sometimes. What do you do when that happens? He thought about it seriously, trying to give her the honesty she'd given him. I don't know. Keep going, I guess. Hope it gets better. And does it get better? Sometimes. Not always. They sat in silence, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of water dripping somewhere in the garden's depths. A butterfly landed on Satsuki's knee, rested there for a moment with slowly moving wings, then fluttered away toward the sunlight. I used to have a garden, she said quietly. Not like this one. Small, neat. My mother taught me how to tend it. Naruto waited, sensing that this was important, that pushing for more would only make her retreat. The air around them felt charged with the weight of memory. I was terrible at it, she continued, her voice distant with remembering. Could never remember to water things. Always pulled up the wrong weeds. But she was patient with me. She'd show me the same thing over and over until I got it right. What happened to it? Satsuki's hand tightened around the leaf she was holding, crushing it between her fingers. The sound was small but somehow violent in the quiet garden. Same thing that happened to everything else. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with loss and old pain. Naruto wanted to say something comforting, wanted to offer some kind of solution or hope. Instead, he picked up his own leaf and began tearing it into small pieces, letting the silence hold space for her grief. Do you miss it? He asked finally. Gardening, I mean. I miss having something to take care of. Something that depended on me but wasn't complicated. Plants are simple. Plants don't lie. They don't have hidden agendas. If you take care of them, they grow. If you don't, they die. She looked around the overgrown garden, taking in the riot of unchecked growth. It's honest. Unlike people. Unlike people. Naruto nodded, understanding more than he wanted to. They were all wearing masks, all playing games, all pretending to be something other than what they were. Even now, sitting in this abandoned garden, he could feel the careful distance she maintained, the walls she kept in place. We're all pretty complicated, aren't we? Some more than others. They lapsed into quiet again, but it felt different now. Less careful. As if something small but important had shifted between them, like a door opening just a crack. A rustle in the trees above caught Satsuki's attention. She looked up sharply, body tensing with sudden alertness. What is it? Naruto asked, following her gaze. Nothing, she said, but her eyes remained fixed on the canopy. I thought I saw. I'll be right back. She stood abruptly, moving toward the deeper part of the garden where the undergrowth grew thicker. Stay here. Naruto watched her disappear behind a tangle of overgrown shrubs, her movements careful and silent. He waited, listening to the quiet sounds of the garden, the drip of water, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds. Minutes passed. Then, from somewhere in the green depths, came the soft flutter of wings. When Satsuki returned, her expression was carefully neutral, but something had changed. There was a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before, a tightness around her eyes that spoke of unwelcome news. Everything okay? Naruto asked. Fine. The word came too quickly, too flat. She sat back down on the moss-covered bench, but didn't quite settle, as if part of her was preparing to leave. Naruto studied her profile, noting the subtle shift in her posture, the way her hands had formed loose fists in her lap. Something had happened in those few minutes she'd been gone, something that had put her back on edge. But he didn't push. Not today. Instead, she was the one studying him when he looked up from the leaf he'd been shredding. Her dark eyes moved over his face, his shoulders, taking in details with the analytical precision he remembered from their academy days. You've gotten taller, she said suddenly. The observation was so unexpected that he blinked. Have I? Much taller. And, she paused, as if debating whether to continue. Broader. You don't look like a kid anymore. Heat crept up his neck again. Neither do you. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and immediately he felt his face burn. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on his obvious embarrassment. I suppose we wouldn't, would we? It's been years. Yeah, years. An awkward silence settled between them, thick with awareness of all the ways time had changed them both. Satsuki? Her voice was distant, distracted. "Thank you for showing me this place." She glanced at him, and for just a moment, her expression softened. But there was something else there now too, something that looked almost like regret. "You're welcome." Afternoon, by the river. They made their way out of the garden eventually, though neither seemed eager to leave its peaceful isolation. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces as they walked, and some of the awkwardness from the morning had begun to fade, replaced by something that wasn't quite comfort but wasn't antagonism either. Without discussing it, they found themselves heading toward the river that ran along the edge of town. Here, away from the main thoroughfares, the water ran clear and shallow over smooth stones. Willow trees drooped their branches into the current, and the only sounds were the gentle murmur of water and the distant calls of birds. The path along the riverbank was worn but not well maintained. Wildflowers grew in the spaces between stones, and occasionally they had to step around fallen branches or navigate patches where the path had been washed away by spring floods. As they rounded a bend where the path narrowed considerably, Satsuki stumbled slightly on a loose stone. Instinctively, Naruto reached out to steady her, his hand catching hers. For a moment, they both froze. Her hand was smaller than his remembered, calloused from weapon work but somehow still soft. He could feel her pulse against his palm, quick and light. She pulled away first, but not immediately. Not as quickly as she might have once. "Thanks," she said quietly, not looking at him. "Yeah, no problem," he replied, shoving his hands deep in his pockets and trying to ignore the way his heart was suddenly racing. The warmth of her touch seemed to linger on his skin. They walked the rest of the way to the fallen log in careful silence, both of them hyper-aware of the space between them. Satsuki sat down on a fallen log that stretched partway over the water. The bark was smooth from weather and wear, comfortable despite its rustic nature. Naruto joined her, their shoulders almost touching this time. "It's peaceful here," he said, watching a family of ducks paddle by in formation. A fish jumped somewhere upstream, the splash echoing in the quiet. Dragonflies darted over the water's surface, their wings catching the afternoon light. "Do you think you could be happy in a place like this? If things were different, I mean." Satsuki was quiet for a long time, watching the water flow past. When she finally answered, her voice was thoughtful, careful. "I don't know what happy means anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean I've been angry for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else." She picked up a stone from the log and turned it over in her palm, studying its smooth surface. "Anger is useful. It keeps you moving, keeps you focused. But happiness?" She shook her head. "Happiness feels dangerous." "Why?" "Because the moment you let yourself be happy, that's when everything gets taken away." The words were quiet, matter of fact, but they hit Naruto like a physical blow. He could hear years of experience in that statement, a philosophy born from loss and hardened by necessity. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that good things could last, that she deserved happiness. But the pain in her voice stopped him, the weight of lived experience that his optimism couldn't simply override. Instead, he picked up his own stone and threw it into the water. It disappeared beneath the surface with a small splash, sending ripples across the current. "What if it doesn't get taken away?" he asked quietly. "It always does." "Always?" "In my experience." They sat in silence, both of them throwing stones into the current. Each splash seemed to punctuate the conversation, small acts of destruction in the peaceful afternoon. Naruto found himself watching Satsuki's profile, the way the afternoon light caught in her dark hair, the careful control she maintained even in this moment of relative peace. There was something almost meditative about it, the selection of stones, the arc of throwing, the brief moment of flight before the inevitable splash. No skill required, no technique to master. Just the simple physics of weight and gravity. As Naruto reached for another stone, he miscalculated and scraped his knuckles against the rough bark of the log. A thin line of blood welled up across his hand. "You're bleeding," Satsuki observed. "It's nothing." He started to wipe it on his jacket, but she caught his wrist. "Don't. You'll get it infected." Before he could protest, she was examining the cut, her fingers cool and careful against his skin. She was close enough that he could see the individual eyelashes framing her dark eyes, could smell the faint scent of soap and something uniquely her. "It's not deep," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But you should clean it." She reached into her pack and pulled out a small cloth, dampening it in the river water. When she began cleaning the cut, her touch was gentle, almost tender. Naruto held perfectly still, barely breathing. The intimacy of the moment, her careful attention, the warmth of her fingers, the way she was focused entirely on him, made his heart pound so loudly he was sure she could hear it. "There," she said finally, sitting back. But she didn't let go of his hand immediately, and for a few heartbeats they stayed like that, connected. When she realized what she was doing, she dropped his hand quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "Try to be more careful," she said, her voice back to its usual cool tone. "Yeah," he managed, flexing his fingers where she'd touched them. "I will. I'm sorry," he said suddenly. She looked at him. For what? For not understanding. For trying to fix things instead of just listening. "You always were a terrible listener."
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.